Welcome to this Moho tutorial. My name is Modelman, and in today's video we'll dive into the dynamic world of frame-by-frame animation. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, this guide is gonna help you master the essentials and explore the advanced features of Moho Pro. From creating and managing layers to animating, we'll cover everything you need to know to bring your visions to life. You'll learn how to duplicate, delete, and manipulate frames, as well as how to label and navigate through your animation timeline efficiently. We'll also tackle common anomalies and bugs, ensuring you're equipped to handle any hiccups along the way. We'll delve into the differences between Moho 14.1 Pro and the previous version, Moho 13.5 Pro, so that you can learn about Moho's latest enhancements. Get ready to unleash your creativity as we explore techniques for crafting stunning gas, liquid, and neon effects, and add that extra punch to action sequences with motion lines. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be animating with confidence and style. So let's get started. First, I have to say that to create any action, there are two methods that you can use. The first method is creating your animation pose to pose. Let's say we have a frame called N and another frame called M. In pose to pose, you just say on the frame N, my shape is here, and on the frame M, my shape is here. Then the software will automatically create the frames between N and M for you. So in pose to pose, you just define the main poses, and you don't need to define all frames. It's the job of your software to do that. But sometimes you're not happy with the way that your software creates those frames between the frame N and M for you. And that's when you prefer to use a straight ahead action method. In straight ahead action, you create your action by drawing every single frame by yourself. In Moho, for a straight ahead action method, there are two types of layers that we can use. One is switch layer and the other one is frame by frame layer. As you saw in the title, in this video we're going to focus on frame by frame layer only. By the way, you should also know that straight ahead action and pose to pose is one of the 12 principles of animation, which every animator should know about them. And the good news is I already have a video about it. If you're interested in learning all of them, you can go and watch it. Alright, the first topic that I want to talk about is how to create a frame by frame layer. I say frame by frame layer, but you can also say frame by frame group. Since group is a type of layer, we can use the term frame by frame layer and frame by frame group interchangeably. There is literally no difference. Generally, there are three ways to create a frame by frame layer. Let's talk about the first way. To begin, you go to new layer and then you choose frame by frame. And it will create a frame by frame layer. Here you can choose a name for it. For instance, let me type frame by frame and hit enter to confirm its name. And as you can see, we have an icon next to it. The icon shows you a series of images next to each other, meaning that this layer is frame by frame layer. Also, as soon as you create it, Moho will automatically create a layer inside of it, and it uses that layer to create a keyframe for you here. To close this menu, I just have to click outside of it. And if I hold my mouse on this keyframe, you can see the name of the layer that it's using. Now let me show you another way to create a frame by frame layer. You can click on here and choose switch. This will create a switch group, or let's say a switch layer. Let me write a name for this. And then I hit enter. And because it's a switch layer, the icon of it is different from a frame by frame layer. In this method, to create a frame by frame layer, first we need to create a switch layer and then we convert it to a frame by frame layer. Let me show you. You just double click on your layer, then you go to switch tab, and from here you check frame by frame drawing. If you check this option, as soon as you click on OK or apply, it'll convert your switch layer to a frame by frame layer like this. You can see that now we have a keyframe here and the icon of it is different now. It looks like the icon of a frame by frame layer. And the thing is, you can also convert it again to a switch layer. You just have to uncheck this option and click on apply or OK like that. But for now, I'm going to check it and click on OK. So it will be a frame by frame layer. If I right click on it, you can see that there is no layer inside of it. Another way to find out that there is no layer inside of this layer is that there is no arrow icon next to it. So in case I, for example, move this layer inside the frame by frame layer, it'll have this arrow icon next to it, meaning that there is a layer inside of this group. I'm gonna hit Ctrl Z, and as you can see, we just turned a switch layer into a frame by frame layer. What we can learn from this method is a frame by frame layer is actually a switch layer. The only difference is we just check this option. So this checkbox is the main difference between a switch layer and a frame by frame layer. But since in this episode we're gonna focus on frame by frame layer, I don't want to talk about switch layer that much. We're gonna focus on it in the next episode, especially these options and the other options that are related to switch layer. So for now, let's click on OK. Another thing is that since this frame by frame layer is empty and we don't have any layer inside of it, this keyframe is not connected to any layer. So for example, if I hold my mouse on it, it doesn't write anything, meaning that this keyframe is not connected to any layer. As you can see, to create these two frame by frame layers, we were on the frame 0. But what if we want to create a frame by frame layer when we are not on the frame 0? For instance, let me click on the frame 24 to go to frame 24. And this time, let's try to create a frame by frame layer. As you can see, the option is gray here, meaning that it's off and we are not allowed to create a frame by frame layer. So that's just it, or is there a way to do it? Before I talk about how to create a frame by frame layer when we are not on the frame 0, let's talk about why we are not allowed to create a frame by frame layer when we are not on the frame 0. In fact, in Moho, frame 0 is for drawing and other frames are for animating. But why Moho forces you to draw everything on the frame 0? It is too annoying to go back to frame 0 every time. Well, to answer this question, first we have to find a way to create a new layer when we are not on the frame 0, so we can see what goes wrong. To do that, you can go to Edit, and then Preferences. From here, you go to Tools tab, and you can see an option here called Enable Drawing Tools Only on Frame 0. So this option is the option that forces you to draw everything on the frame 0. If you don't want it, you just uncheck it. From now on, if you click on OK, you can draw everything when you're not on the frame 0. You can create layers when you're not on the frame 0. So let's just click on OK and see what goes wrong. For instance, if I click on here and choose bone, to create a bone layer, you can see that everything's fine here. And now that we created this layer and we can draw something when we are not on the frame 0, first we make sure that the add bone tool is selected. If it's not selected, you can just click on it or hit A. And now I can draw a bone. But as soon as I draw it, Moho automatically creates some keyframes for you. This way, Moho tries to remember the scale, rotation, and position of your bone in this frame. However, we didn't ask Moho to create these keyframes, but since Moho wants to show us the bone with this position, this scale, and this angle, it has to create these keyframes. See, the problem is that if you enable the option to create layers and draw things when you're not on the frame 0, you might unintentionally create some keyframes. That is why by default Moho forces you to draw everything on the frame 0. Of course, now that you are aware of the fact that creating layers on frames other than 0 will create keyframes for you, you can use this feature anytime you want. And every time that you think you don't need these keyframes, you can just select them by dragging, and then you can hit the delete key on your keyboard to delete them. Let me delete this bone group. And also the feature is also available for frame by frame layers. So now I can create a frame by frame layer while I'm not on the frame 0. See? Let me type a name for it. Then I hit enter to confirm its name. And the first thing that you might notice is that we have an arrow icon next to it. This means that we have some layers inside this layer. If I right click on it, you can see these layers. Of course, layer 1 is for the first keyframe and layer 2 is for the second keyframe. To make sure, I can click outside of this menu, for example here, to close it. Then I hold my mouse on these keyframes. This keyframe is using layer 2 and this keyframe is using layer 1. As you can see, when you enable the option to create layers when you are not on the frame 0 and then you create a frame by frame layer, Moho will create 2 empty frames for you. By default, it's going to call them layer 1 and layer 2. Before we continue, let me give you a summary of the 3 methods to create a frame by frame layer. When it comes to creating a frame by frame layer, we have 3 situations. Sometimes you're on the frame 0, like this layer. In that case, you just click on here and choose frame by frame layer. Sometimes you just create a switch layer, and then using its layer settings, you go to switch tab and check this option and click on apply or OK. And sometimes you go to edit, preferences and tools, and you uncheck this option, and then you can create your frame by frame layer when you are not on the frame 0. Like this example. You can see the difference here. For instance, this method will create only one layer and one keyframe. This method will only create a frame by frame layer and also a keyframe for you, so you don't have any layer inside of it. And this method will create 2 layers and 2 keyframes for you. Depending on your situation, you might prefer to use one of these 3 methods to create your frame by frame layer. Before I talk about the next topic, I would like to delete these layers. Also, I want to go to edit and preferences and then tools and check this option because I don't want to create keyframes when we are not on the frame 0 unintentionally. And then I click on OK. And then I go back to frame 0 so I can create a new frame by frame layer. To do that, I go to new layer and choose frame by frame. Let me type a name for it. And then I hit enter to confirm its name. So as I said, when you create a frame by frame layer with this method, a layer will be created inside your frame by frame layer, and Moho uses this layer to create a keyframe for you. This one and this one will be considered as a single frame of your frame by frame layer. So from now on, when I say frame, I might refer to the frames on the timeline or the frames of the frame by frame layer. But the question is, how can we add a new frame? Well, to do that, first we have to go to the next frame, then we have to create a layer inside our frame by frame layer, and then we have to use that layer to create a keyframe on the frame 1, which as you can see, takes a lot of time. So is there a better way, a faster one? The answer is yes. Let me click outside of this window to close it. To create a new frame for your frame by frame layer, all you have to do is to just click on this option, like this. It's called new frame, as you can see. Another way is that you can press F5 on your keyboard, and this will also create a new frame for you. Meaning that when you press F5 or you click on this option, first, Moho checks to see if there is any keyframe at your current frame. If there is not, your playhead stays where it is. Otherwise, your playhead goes to the next frame. Then Moho creates a new layer inside your frame by frame layer. And after that, Moho uses that layer to create a keyframe for you at the current frame. This check here next to layer 3 shows that our current frame uses this layer. Another way to see it is holding your mouse on it. See, it says layer 3. What about this one? It uses layer 2, and then we have layer 1. Meaning that, for instance, if I go to this frame, which its keyframe uses layer 2, if I right click on here, layer 2 will be checked. Since these layers are inside our frame by frame group, we call them child layers. Let me click outside of this window to close it, and then to remove this keyframe, I hit Ctrl Z. Another point is that you can see that there is a number here, and right now it is 1, meaning that if I press F5, it creates my frames every 1 frame. But if you want to create your frames every 5 frames, for example, you can just change it to 5. Now if I hit enter and press F5 and again, you can see that it creates my frames every 5 frames. Another point is that when you're working with frame by frame layer and you have a layer inside of it, in this case this is layer 2, the drawing tools will be available for you. So we are on the frame 1, but we can use this tool, for example, to draw something. We can use this tool to draw something, or we can use this tool to draw something. Let me hit Ctrl Z. But if you take a look at a normal vector layer, you'll notice that when you're not on the frame 0, the drawing tools won't be available for you. Of course, unless you uncheck the option in Tools tab here. Let me hit Cancel and go back to frame by frame layer. So unlike a vector layer, when we have a frame by frame layer and we are not on the frame 0, since we have all the drawing tools, we can use any tool that we want to draw something on this frame. One thing that I want to mention is that it doesn't matter if you stay on this keyframe or you go to the next frames. As long as you don't reach the next keyframe, you're still drawing inside this layer, layer 2. So although I'm not on this keyframe and I went to the next frame, if I try to draw something, Moho will draw it inside layer 2. So for example, let's say we want to draw something on the frame 6. To do that, we just select it and press F5. Now a new empty frame will be added as a new layer, as you can see, layer 3. If you're not sure, you can hold your mouse on it. This keyframe is connected to layer 3, as you can see. And now I can draw something else. What I wanted to show you is that if I go back, we have the same frame from this keyframe until the frame before that keyframe. And as soon as we reach a new keyframe, a new frame will be shown. And as I said, to draw something on this frame, no matter where you are, as long as you don't reach the next keyframe, you can draw something on it. And now we can have this new line from frame 1 until frame 5. Now I want to hit Ctrl Z to remove these keyframes, and again and again. Okay, now I go back to frame 0 and press F5 to create a new frame. And when you're working with freehand tool, if you want to increase the size of your brush, you can hold down the Alt key and drag to the right. And if you want to decrease it, you drag it to the left. When you're happy with the size of your brush, you just release your click. And as you can see, the size of your brush is actually the width of your shapes. Previously it was 4, but now it's 32 something. And right now, because auto stroke option is checked, if we draw something, it only draws a stroke. To choose a color for your stroke, you can either right click somewhere on these colors like this, see, the color changed, or you can drag on this eyedropper and release it somewhere on these colors like this to change the color of your stroke. In this case, I'm just happy with the black color, so I just right click on it. And now we want to draw a simple line that moves from the left side of the screen to the right side. So I just draw a line for my first frame. I don't want to draw a straight line, so don't worry about it. And then I press F5 again and draw my next frame, and again and again. Let's see what we've drawn so far. To play my animation, I hold down the Control and I right click on top of my timeline, for example here, to set a temporary end marker. From now on, this marker will be considered as your end frame. But don't worry, your real end frame will be considered for rendering, but this marker will be considered just as a temporary end frame. So from now on, every time that our playhead reaches this marker, Moho tries to repeat our animation from the first frame. Let me play it. As you can see, it's really fast. To scale them, you have to start dragging somewhere on your timeline. And now as you can see, we're drawing a rectangle. You have to draw it until it covers all keyframes you want to select. Since our animation starts from the first frame, we don't want to select the keyframe that is on the frame 0. So I just release my click on here. Now that we selected these keyframes, we have to hold down the Alt key and we have to start dragging from the last keyframe. Like this. If you move your mouse to the right, your animation will be slower, and if you move your mouse to the left, your animation will be faster. Let me release it on here. Then I hold down the Control and right click on here to set frame 12 as my temporary end frame, and then I play the animation. See? Now the speed is much better. As you can see, the movement here is constant, meaning that this line moves at a constant speed. For those of you who don't know about this, we have 12 principles of animation, which every animator should know about them. One of those principles is called slow in and slow out. The thing about slow in and slow out is, when we want to animate our actions, we have to start them slowly and we have to end them slowly. For those of you who want to start practicing frame by frame animation, it's really good to practice this principle. Let me show you how you can do it. I'm gonna press Ctrl Z multiple times to remove all of my keyframes. Then I go to the keyframe that I have on the frame 1. And now I want to create the same animation, but this time I want to follow the slow in and slow out principle. I want my line to start slowly. So first I draw it. Then I press F5. At the beginning, it hardly moves like this. And then suddenly, we just move it. And again, here, we want it to move slowly until it reaches here. Let me add some more length to it. And now I drag to select these keyframes, except the first keyframe. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag on my last keyframe to the right. Here should be good. So I release my click here, then I hold on the control and I right click on somewhere around here. So now when my playhead reaches this frame 40, Moho will repeat my animation. I want to play this animation from frame 1, so I'm going to click on here and then I hit the space key on my keyboard to play this animation for you. See? It starts slowly, it ends slowly, but in the middle, it speeds up. And that's it. It's time to talk about the next topic. I'm gonna delete this frame by frame layer. Then I hold down the control and right click on here to remove my marker. Then I go back to frame 0. And since we selected some keyframes, the color of these options turned gray. I just want to click somewhere in my timeline to have them with the right colors. The next topic is frame by frame layer differences between Moho 13 and Moho 14. By the way, frame by frame layer in Moho 13.5 is just like Moho 13, and frame by frame layer in Moho 14.1 is just like Moho 14. So in this video, when I say Moho 14, I mean Moho 14 and 14.1. And when I say Moho 13, I mean Moho 13 and 13.5. For this video, to show you the differences, I'm gonna use Moho 13.5 and Moho 14.1. To compare them, first we have to create the same project in both of them. So let's start with Moho 14.1. Here in Moho 14.1, I want to create a frame by frame layer. Then I select freehand tool and I go to frame 12. Then I press F5 to create a new frame and then I draw something. Then I go to frame 24 and press F5 and draw something else. And finally I go to frame 36 and press F5 and draw something else. Now let's create something similar to it in Moho 13.5. Here in Moho 13.5, first I create a frame by frame layer, and the first thing that you see is that although we have a layer inside of it, we don't have any keyframe on the frame 0. This is the first difference between Moho 14 and 13. So in Moho 13, when you create a frame by frame layer, it does not create a keyframe for you on the frame 0. Now I want to select my freehand tool, and then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush. Maybe smaller than this. It should be closer to something like 32. That is good. Then I go to frame 12, press F5 and draw something on this frame like this. Then I go to frame 24. I press F5 and draw something else. And then I go to frame 36. Press F5 and draw something else. As you can see, the way that we see our keyframes are different from Moho 14. In Moho 13, we have some gaps in between. And at the right side of each gap is where our keyframes begin. So for example, the beginning of our previous keyframe is at the right side of this previous gap, which is gonna be frame 24 as I said. But it's just not that the way that we see them is different. Actually, in Moho 14, if you want to select a keyframe, you cannot drag on here to select it. See? To select this keyframe, your rectangle should cover it, like this. Now let's take a look at Moho 13.5. But here our keyframes act like a line. So for instance, if I drag on somewhere around here, I still can select this keyframe, which is beginning is here. So you can actually drag anywhere between the beginning of your keyframe and the end of it. It always selects your keyframe. See? And it's not just it. Rather than the way that you see and the way that you select them, the way that you move your keyframes are different. Let's take a look at Moho 14. Here by dragging on this area, I cannot move this keyframe unless I drag on this square, like this. Now the next frame of our frame by frame layer will begin from here, and before that we'll have our previous frame. Now let's take a look at Moho 13.5. Here moving keyframes is a bit hard, and also it can sometimes bring some bugs. Consider our last keyframe for example. Let's first try to drag it from here for example. As you can see, we can easily move it because this is our last keyframe and there is no keyframe after it. But when it comes to a keyframe that we have another keyframe after it, if you want to drag it from center, it just doesn't work. which might be confusing for some users. For the keyframes that we have another keyframe after them, you have to make sure your mouse is very close to their gaps. I mean this gap. So I just drag from here, see? And now I can move this keyframe. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it from the right side of the gap or the left side of it. We can also drag it from here, see? There is also a bug. I wonder if I can show you when it happens. If your mouse is not close enough, although you can move your keyframes, sometimes you cannot move it back. This bug only happens with your last keyframe, I guess. Let's try it. I'm gonna move my mouse this close to my keyframe, and then I try to drag on it, and then when I want to move it back, I just can't, see? But this bug does not happen to our other keyframes. For instance, this one, let me try it. We cannot move it unless we drag on somewhere close to the gap, here. And as you can see, it's close enough. Now we can move it back and forth. Another difference is when you want to create an empty frame, like for example here, the color of it will be just the same as the other ones. Now let's try it in Moho 14. In Moho 14, I want to click on frame 72. Then I create a new frame inside my frame by frame layer. And as you can see, frames like this frame or our first frame, which was this one, that are empty will be gray in our timeline. Let me deselect my keyframes by clicking on somewhere on my timeline. You can see that the squares are gray and the lines after them are gray. It really helps us to recognize our empty frames. The next difference that I want to talk about is when you want to copy a keyframe. Take this keyframe as an example, frame layer 4. Here in Moho 14, if I select this keyframe and hit Ctrl C to copy it, as you can see it uses layer 4. I can for example click on here, frame 96, and press Ctrl V to paste it. But look, it created a new layer called layer 6. Now this new keyframe is using a new layer, which means that if I draw something inside of it, this new shape will only be added to this keyframe. So if I go back to that one has remained as it was. What about Moho 13? As you can see here, this keyframe is using layer 4. If I select it, hit Ctrl C, go to frame 96 for example, and press Ctrl V. If I hold my mouse on this keyframe, as you can see it's using the same layer. Meaning that if I draw something on this layer, not only I'm adding this new shape to this keyframe, but also I'm adding it to this one. See? So while Ctrl C and V copies your keyframe in Moho 14, in Moho 13.5, Ctrl C and V duplicates them. Meaning that instead of using a new layer to create your keyframe, it's gonna use the same layer, as you can see. And what you draw inside the layer will always be inside that layer, obviously. But here the question is, since Ctrl C and V duplicates the keyframes in Moho 13.5, is there a way to copy them? Well, the answer is yes. Take this layer 4 as an example. I can find layer 4. If I click on this arrow icon, there it is. I can select it, and then I can make a copy of it. The name of this new layer is layer 6. Just try to remember the name of it. I'm gonna click on this arrow icon again. Then I click on the frame 120. Right click on here. And now by clicking on layer 6, a new keyframe will be created here. And as you can see, this keyframe is using layer 6, which is a new layer compared to the layer 4 that we had previously. Meaning that if I draw something inside layer 6, I will only have this new shape inside layer 6 and not layer 4. Another question is, since Ctrl C and V copies your frames in Moho 14, is there a way to duplicate them? Well, there is a way to duplicate them. Take this layer 4 as an example. If I go to a frame like 120 to use layer 4 again, I just have to right click on here and choose layer 4. Now, since this keyframe is using layer 4, and this keyframe is using layer 4, if I draw something on this keyframe, like this, it will be also added to this keyframe. And the next topic that I want to talk about is adding effects. Adding effects to the shape of your frame by frame layers is just the same as adding effects to the shape of your vector layers. There is no difference. So let's say we have a rectangle, for example. If I hit Q or select the select shape tool from here, I can select this shape, for example, and go to effect. There are some effects here that we can apply on our selected shape. For instance, I can apply a shaded effect. See? You should also know that in Moho 13.5 or Moho 14, you cannot see some effects properly unless you render them using Ctrl R or you select other layers. But in Moho 14.1, this version that I'm using right now, most effects are visible for you in editing view, like this shaded effect that we've just applied on this shape. Let me delete this layer, and then I go back to frame 0. Also, since I don't want to use any effect, I'd like to set this one to plain, meaning that from now on, if I draw something, it will not have any effect. Another difference is in Moho 14, when you create a frame by frame layer, it'll show you your first keyframe. However, in Moho 13.5, when you create a frame by frame layer, it doesn't show you your first keyframe until you create a new one, like this. And one thing about reusing child layers is that when you create a frame by frame layer and draw some frames inside it, like this, if you want to reuse a layer that you created previously, like using these ones, when you're on this frame, for example, here in Tools window, you can see a new section called Special, and here we have a new option called Switch Layer. If you click on it, you can reuse your layers from here. For example, now if I click on 2, it'll use layer 2 to create a new keyframe for me. The next topic that I want to talk about is a problem with frame by frame layer. First, let's take a look at this problem in Moho 13.5. Let me go back to frame 0 and delete this layer. Then I create a frame by frame layer. And the thing is, in Moho 13.5, if I click on this arrow icon, I can see my child layers. Now let's do the same thing in Moho 14.1. Well, here, if I create a frame by frame layer, clicking on this arrow icon does not show my child layers. So if you guys have Moho 14 or 14.1, you'll have the same problem. But if this is the future and you're watching this video, this problem may have been fixed by the time you're watching this video. But anyways, let's say you have this problem. Now, is there a way to see our child layers? The answer is yes. But before I show you how you can see your child layers in Moho 14.1, it is worth mentioning that the reason that you can't do it is that in Moho 14.1, if you try to see and manipulate your child layers directly and not through your frame by frame layer itself, it can cause some weird bugs and sometimes even your Moho can crash. So you should know that in Moho 14 and 14.1, it is illegal or somehow not safe to see your child layers. But rather than the bugs, seeing your child layers has also some benefits. So if you learn the problems and benefits, then it'll be safe to do it and you can benefit from it. To see your child layers in Moho 14 or 14.1, there are 3 ways that you can do. The first way is that if you haven't created your frame by frame layer yet, then you can first create a switch layer. You double click on it, you know the rest. You can go to switch and then check this option and click on OK. Now if I create a new frame, you can see that with this method, I can see the child layers of my frame by frame layer, like layer 1. See? All of them are visible. So this is one way to do it. Let me go back to frame 0. But let's say you already have your frame by frame layer. In this case, checking or unchecking this option will not help you see your child layers. So what I can do in this case? In this case, you can go to your layer settings and then you go to switch tab and then you uncheck this option, click on apply. And now if you look at the icon of this layer, you can see that it's a switch layer. And because it's a switch layer, we can see its child layers. And now that our child layers are visible, we can just check this option and click on apply again or OK. And from now on, I can see the child layers that I create. And I just want you to know that when you see your child layers, you can move them outside of your frame by frame layer. Like this. You should also know that when your child layers are visible, as soon as you click on this arrow icon, you cannot click on it again. See? To show your child layers again. Unless you double click on it again, go to switch tab and do the same thing that I did. Well, as you can see, it is very hard to every time do this process so you can see your child layers. And that's when we ask ourselves, is there another way to show our child layers? And the answer is yes. To see the child layers of your frame by frame layers, there is a third way, and that is using the search option. As you may have noticed, every time that we create a frame by frame layer, Moho starts to name them with the word layer. So the first layer that it creates will always be layer 1, and then we have layer 2, layer 3, etc. Which means if you set this option to name contains and try to type the word layer, you will have access to your child layers. But the problem here is that, unlike other methods, in this third method, you cannot move your child layers out of your frame by frame layer. See? I'm dragging, but nothing's gonna happen. I cannot move layer 3 out of my frame by frame layer. And this is our only limitation in this method, except this one, you can literally do anything with these layers, like selecting them, double clicking on them to go to their settings, or even you can go to frame 0, for example, to draw something inside them. And when you're done with what you want to do with these layers, you just drag on this text and hit backspace on your keyboard so you can have everything back as they were at the beginning. Let me delete these two layers. And before I talk about the benefits and problems with seeing your child layers, let's just focus on the other options that we have here. As I explained, we have an option called New Frame. If you click on it or press F5, it first creates a layer inside your frame by frame layer and then uses that layer to create a keyframe for you here. One thing about New Frame button is that if I draw something inside this layer and press F5 or use New Frame button, my new frame, or I mean my new layer, will always be empty. So what if I want to keep my previous frame and then add something to it or subtract something from it? In that case, let me hit Ctrl Z. You can use this option, duplicate frame. You can either press F6 on your keyboard or click on it. Now as you can see, this new keyframe uses layer 3 and our previous keyframe uses layer 2. But both layer 3 and layer 2 are just like each other, and in both of them we have the same shapes. If I go back to frame 1, you can see that there is no difference between them. In fact, when you click on this option, duplicate frame, first it checks to see if there is any keyframe at your current frame. Then if there is no keyframe, it looks backwards, and the first keyframe that it finds, it looks into that keyframe and finds its layer, then it duplicates that layer, and then it uses that layer to create a new keyframe for you. Of course, if you have a keyframe at your current frame, it's gonna create that keyframe after your current keyframe. But if you don't have any keyframe at your current frame, it just finds the first keyframe before it, uses its layer to create a new layer, and then it uses that layer to create the keyframe at your current frame. And although it says duplicating, you're actually copying the frames of your frame by frame layer, because the layer that they use are different from each other. Meaning that if I apply some changes to this layer, our previous frame will remain as it was. Just like when we use Ctrl C and V in Moho 14. We press Ctrl C, click on somewhere, we press Ctrl V, and Moho first make a copy of this layer, which is gonna be this layer, layer 6, and then it use layer 6 to create this keyframe for you. So in fact, there is no difference between when you hit Ctrl C and V in Moho 14 or when you use this option, duplicate frame. Both will do the same. Let me hit Ctrl Z again and again and go back to frame 1. Then I first press F5 to create a new layer and a new keyframe. And let me type 4 here because now I want to create my frames every 4 frames, and I press enter. And now I want to show you an example of using this feature, duplicate frame button. For example, in case you want to start with a simple shape and then add something to it, you can first start with a point like this. Then if I press F5 or use this option, new frame, my next frame will be empty, meaning that again I have to draw everything from the scratch. But in this case, because I want to keep this shape, I prefer to use F6. I mean this option. I press F6, and since I set this number to 4, it's gonna create my new frame 4 frames after 1, which is gonna be frame 5. And then in my next frame I can add something to this point. I want to draw letter M gradually. Then I press F6 again and I draw the rest of it again. And then I continue. You just draw a part of it and then hit F6. And now that it's finished, I'm gonna go 4 frames after this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, here I'm gonna hold down the control and right click on here to set a temporary end frame, and then I play this animation for you. See? We're kind of drawing it, and we can adjust the distances as well. So for instance, let's say we want their distance to be like this. Now I'm gonna hold down the control and right click on somewhere around here. Let me play it for you. Now it's kind of faster. Let me delete this frame by frame layer and go back to frame 0. Then I hold down the control and remove this marker. And let me show you another usage of this. Let's say we have a frame by frame layer. Let me call this eating apple and press enter. Then I go to the first frame, press F5 to create an empty frame. And for my first frame, let's say I want to draw an apple. So first I choose circle. Then I start to draw, and while I'm dragging, I can hold on the shift key to draw a perfect circle. Then I hit the T key, hold down the control and select these 3 points. Then I hit G, or you can select this tool instead. And then I click on split. Let's do the same thing with the other side as well. I just have to drag to select these points. And then I click on split. Then I hit the T key again to select the transform points tool. Next, I'm going to hold down the control and drag to select this point. I start to move it, and while I'm moving it, I'm going to hold down the shift key to move it exactly vertically. Then I'm going to hold down the control, select these 2 points. I'm going to hold down the alt key and drag to put them closer to each other and move them symmetrically. Then I move them in the y-axis. I hold down the shift key to move them vertically, as I said. Then I hold down the control and click on somewhere to deselect them. And finally I start dragging from here to up here. And it's better to hold down the control and shift and add this one to my selection. Then I hold down the alt key and move them closer to each other. And finally I hold down the control, select all of it and scale it a bit. And now we have an apple. To have a thinner stroke, I can hit Q, select it, type another number like 15 for its stroke. And you may want to add some more details to it. Like for example, you can draw a line here. Then I hit tab to select the points of this line. Then I hit the U key to select the create shape tool. And then you make sure stroke is selected and you click on create shape. Well, let me hit Q again to select the select shape tool and type something like 8 for the stroke of this one. Then I hit the C key and drag on this point to make it smoother, and then to adjust the position of its points, I hit tab to select all points of it. I hit T, scroll up to zoom in, drag from the corner, and while I'm doing it, I'm going to hold down the alt key to do it symmetrically and make it smaller. Then I press home key on my keyboard to reset my view. After that, to draw a leaf, I hit the S key to select the draw shape tool again. This time I choose rectangle, and I draw a rectangle like this. Then I hit the T key, and then by holding down the control, I select the lower points of it, and I scroll up to zoom in, and again and again. Then I hold down the alt key and drag from one side and hold down the alt key to scale it symmetrically. I think I'm happy with it. I hit Q, select it, choose a color for it. I press home key on my keyboard to zoom out, and let me click on somewhere to deselect it. Then I press T on my keyboard to select the transform points tool. I hit tab to select all points of it and move it to here. Then I hold on the control again and drag on these 2 points to select them. I scroll up to zoom in. And again, here I start dragging from somewhere between these 2 rectangles, I mean here for example, to rotate these 2 points like this. Then I scroll down to zoom out. I move it to here. Hold down the control and click on somewhere to deselect these points. Then I hit the A key on my keyboard to select the add point tool. And after that I add a point here and another one here. Then I press C on my keyboard to select the curvature tool. I drag on here to make it smoother, and I do the same thing with the other point. Let me press the home key on my keyboard to look at it. Perfect. Next, I press S key on my keyboard to select the draw shape tool, and this time I pick a green color like this one, and I choose circle, and I draw a circle. Then I hit the T key, scroll up to zoom in, right click to pan, I rotate it like this, I press C on my keyboard to select curvature tool, I hold down the control and drag to select this point, and I hold down the Alt key and drag to move the handles. Let's do the same thing with the other part. Then without holding Alt key, I move this handle like this and do the same thing with the other one. After that, I hit the T key, move this point to here, and let me adjust the position of this one as well. While I'm doing it, I can check this option so I can have control over handles again. This way I can move the points and adjust the handles at the same time, which is very cool. Okay, now I'm happy with this leaf. I can press home key on my keyboard to zoom out, and we can add some other details as well. For instance, I can choose freehand tool, and let me take a look at the size of my brush. I'm gonna hold down the Alt key and make it bigger, like this. Not that big. Okay, it's good now. Then I pick this red color and just make it brighter. Maybe this one is good. And then I click on OK. And now if I draw something, as you can see, Moho starts our strokes with a semicircular and ends them with a semicircular. Let me hit Ctrl Z. Now if I go to freehand options, I can check taper start and taper end. And now if I draw something, the start and the end of our line will be sharper, and we can use it to draw light on the surface of our apple. Let me hit Ctrl Z and make the color a bit brighter than this. And now I can draw a small line here like this, just to show the light on the left side of the apple. Now it's time to draw the inside of this apple. Let me hit the T key, click on this apple to select it. Then I hit Ctrl C and then V to make a copy of it. After that, I hit Q, select this new shape that I created on top of all of them, and let's choose a color for it. I want to send this to the back of all of the shapes so I can use it as the color of inside. So let me choose a color like this. Okay, that should be good. I click on OK and send this shape to the back of all shapes. Now, although we can't see it, it's actually there. If I hit the T key, hold on the control and click on somewhere to deselect all points, you can see it at the back of it. Let me hit Ctrl Z. Next, I choose eraser tool. And in this example, I want to show you how you can use subtraction when you're working with duplicate frame. To begin, I press F6 to duplicate this frame. As you can see here, we have a new keyframe and a new layer. And before I subtract something from my apple, as you can see, if I start subtracting, it's going to remove everything. Let me hit Ctrl Z. It's better to first hit Q or select shape tool, and then you have to select this shape, and then you select eraser tool. And we also have an option called checker selection here. If these small squares are too annoying for you, you can just uncheck it. Now, if I erase this apple, like this, I can have something at the back of it. So we can use it to create the animation of eating this apple. And also to eat the shape that is at the back of it, I can hit Q, select this one, hit E, and erase it like this. See? Again, I can press F6. In the next frame, I want to hit Q again, select this shape, hit E, and let's eat this side this time. And of course, this one will be gone. Let me delete it. Next, I hit Q again, select this one, hit E, and let's eat this one as well, like that. Again, I press F6, hit Q, select this one, hit E, let's eat more. Again, I hit Q, select this one, hit E, eat more and more, like this. I press F6, hit Q, select it, hit E, let's eat this side. I hit Q, then E, again F6, Q, E, let's just eat more, Q, E, F6, Q, E, Q, E, F6 again. This should be the last time. I'm gonna hit Q and then E. Let's eat these parts as well. and then Q and then E. I go to the next frame, I hit Q and then E, and Q and then E again. Finally, I go 4 frames after that, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm creating my frames every 4 frames. Then I hold on the control and set an end frame for it. Let me hit Q, click on somewhere to deselect this shape, and let me play it for you. See? That's why duplicating frames is very useful. Just to let you know guys, since with this method, you're actually creating a lot of layers, and as you know, the more layers you have, the more settings should be kept in your memory. If you have a lot of layers in Moho, Moho will run slowly, and it will be very hard for Moho to go through all of those layers, read all of these values, and draw something for you on the screen. So it is more efficient to use the same layer instead of creating a new one. For instance, let's say we want to create this animation vice versa. In that case, instead of using Ctrl+C, which will create a new layer, or instead of using duplicate, which will make a copy of your layer, we can use the layers that we created previously. Like for example here, instead of copying this layer, I just want to reuse it like this. Again, I go 4 frames after that. Here I use this layer, 1, 2, 3, 4. This time I use layer 7. And you can see that I'm just looking at this check next to them. I know that the next time I have to use layer 6. So I click on here and I use layer 6. And then 5. And then 4. And 3. And 2. And finally, we've got 1. Let's take a look at this animation now. See? Actually, I don't need this last frame. Let's just hold down the control and right click on here and delete this one and play it again. See? And let me hit Q and deselect this layer so you can see the result better. Very nice. The next thing that I want to talk about is that how to delete a layer and its keyframes. For example, I want to delete layer 2 and its keyframes. Well, let me show you. If I go to layer settings of my frame by frame layer and then go to switch tab, uncheck this option, click on apply. See my child layers, check this one again and click on OK. By deleting layer 2, its keyframes will remain. As you can see, although we just deleted layer 2, these 2 keyframes still remember that they're connected to layer 2. So let me hit Ctrl+Z. If I delete one of the keyframes that is connected to it, or if I delete all keyframes that are connected to it, the layer will remain. So it is not recommended to delete your child layers when you're working with frame by frame layer using the delete layer button. And it is not recommended to delete the keyframes of a frame by frame layer using the delete key on your keyboard. Because if you delete the layer, the keyframe will remain, and if you delete the keyframe, the layer will remain. So the question is there a way to delete both of them with one single click? The answer is yes. Let me hit Ctrl+Z, and again, in fact, if I click on here, I can delete layer 2 and all keyframes related to it by clicking on this option, delete frame. Also, you can press Shift F5 to do this. See? What it does is that it just looks for the first keyframe that it finds. If it does not find any keyframe at your current frame, it's gonna look backwards for a keyframe, and as soon as it finds one, for example, in this case it's gonna find this one, it finds this layer. For example, in this case it's gonna find layer 3, and then it deletes that keyframe, that layer, and any keyframe that is connected to that layer. See? And then you might say, okay, delete frame button deletes a layer and its keyframes. But is there a way to delete multiple frames instead of just one? Because every time that we click on here, it only deletes one frame. Even if we select multiple keyframes, since it's searching from here backwards, and the first keyframe that it finds is this one, it's not gonna delete the layers of the keyframes before it. Therefore, if I click on this button, it'll only delete that keyframe and the layer of it. So as you can see, there is no way to delete multiple frames of your frame by frame layer using the delete frame button. You can only delete one frame at a time. But then you may say, oh, it's horrible because Moho does not have this feature. But let's say you just want to delete these 3 keyframes and their layers, for example. They're using layer 6 to 8. So first we have to find other keyframes that are using layer 6 to 8 so we can delete them as well. To find the name of the layers of these keyframes, we have to hold our mouse on them. As you can see, these 3 keyframes are using layer 6 to 8. So I can hold on the shift key and select them as well. Then I delete them. And now it's time to delete layer 6 to 8 from the layers window. To select layer 6 to 8, first I click on layer 6 to select it, then I hold down the shift key and select this layer. Using shift helps us to select any layers that we have between layer 6 and layer 8, and then we click on delete layer. Now as you can see, we deleted all of those keyframes and all of those layers. It does not take a long time. Also, I have to say this number does not have any effect on this button. Meaning that this 4 does not mean it deletes your keyframes every 4 frames. As I said, it just looks backwards and then it looks to the first keyframe that it finds. So now this number is 4. However, if I click on delete frame, it'll delete that keyframe and the layer of it and all keyframes that are connected to that layer, which were actually far away from our current frame. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about the safe things that you can do when the child layers of your frame by frame layers are visible. The animation that I want to create right now is actually a simple line that starts to move from this corner and then its path ends here. So to begin, I just want to draw the path so I can understand how I'm gonna draw it. To draw the path, I'm gonna use this tool, add point tool. Then I start to drag from here. Again, I drag, again, and again. I'd like to end it here. Let me hit the T key, or you can click on transform points tool from here. And then I want to adjust the position of these points. And now that my path is ready, I hit the U key to select the create shape tool, or you can choose it from here. Then I choose a stroke. And I type something like 50 and press enter. And then while a point of this path is selected, I just hit tab on my keyboard to select the entire path and I click on create shape. I would like to change its color to yellow. To change its color, I have to right click on here, for example. Now it's time to create our frame by frame layer. We go to new layer and create it. Then I press enter to confirm its name. After that, I press F5 to create a new frame. In this new frame, I hit F to choose freehand tool. Then I right click on here to pick a black color and I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to make my brush smaller. In the first frame, I want my line to be here. Then I press F5 again and draw on the next frame. And again. I just continue to follow this path like this. Every time I draw a line, I just try to draw it with the same length. And finally, the last line should be here. Well, we don't need this one anymore, so let's just hide our path. And if I play my animation, you can see that it's very fast. So it's better to scale them a bit. I'm gonna select all keyframes except the first one. Then I hold down the Alt key and I start dragging from the last keyframe, like this. Then I release my click. And I hold down the Control and right click on the frame 24 to set a temporary end frame, or maybe it's better to set it here on the frame 25. And let me play it for you. It is much better now. Let me deselect my keyframes and go back to frame 0. I would like to make my child layers visible now, so I double click on them, go to switch, uncheck this option, click on apply, click on this arrow icon, check this option again and click on OK. When the child layers of your frame by frame layer are visible, the first thing that is safe to do is to change the layer settings of your child layers. So for example, let's say we want to change the blur radius of half of these layers. In that case, we can select these layers, for example, 9, 7, 5, 3. So I just double click on one of them to open its layer settings. Then I hold down the Control and select the other ones. And now if I change blur radius, you can't see any difference But as you can see here, it says multiple layers are selected. Changes will be applied to all as applicable, meaning that you cannot see the changes unless you click on apply or OK. So let's say we click on apply and now we can see the changes. Actually, it is totally safe to change the settings of your child layers when you're working with frame by frame layers. So we can even use this option, for example, to change their colors. Let's say in this case, we want them to be red. Then we can click on OK and apply. And now as you can see, this one, this one, this one, and this one are red. Now let's make the other layers blue. I select this one, and this one, and this one, and make them blue. Here first I choose a blue color, and after choosing it, I click on OK. And finally, I click on apply. Since I don't need this window anymore, let me click on OK, go to my frame by frame layer, and play this animation for you. If I turn this option off, the points will be hidden and we can see this animation better. Okay, let me turn it on again. So when you make your child layers visible, the first thing that was safe to do is to change their layer settings. You can either change the layer settings of one of them individually or change the layer settings of multiple layers at the same time. Both can be done without any problem. The next safe thing that you can do is that you can animate them individually if you want. For example, let's go to layer 9. Here, because we are at the end of our animation and this is our last frame, I want this line to go outside of the screen. In that case, I can look at the timeline, and as you can see, this area is red, meaning that from this frame to this frame, we cannot see this layer in our render, and in fact, it will be visible from this frame that is not red, and it will be also visible on the frames after that, because here there is no red area. And since I want my end frame to be here, I can click on it, choose transform points tool, then I hold on the control and select all these points and make this line smaller like this. Now you can see we have some keyframes here and some keyframes here, and as you can see, the line is getting smaller and smaller from this keyframe to this keyframe. But we want it to start getting smaller from this frame. In that case, we can select this keyframe, hit Ctrl C and then Ctrl V to make a copy of it, so the size of it does not change from here to here, and then from this keyframe, it starts getting smaller, like this. Now, as you remember, our first layer was an empty layer and it's on the frame 0, so we cannot see it in our animation. But let's go to layer 2. We want to do the same thing from this side. So at the beginning, if I select transform points tool and scroll up to zoom in, we can make this line very small, like this. And as you can see, this layer is visible until this frame, because after it we have a red area. So I'm gonna select this keyframe, hit Ctrl C to make a copy of it, and then I press Ctrl V, and then I press home key on my keyboard to reset my view. You can see the animation here. Now let's take a look at it in our frame by frame layer. I go to frame 1 and hit the space key to play my animation. See? So this is how you can animate your child layers. The next safe thing to do is that you can move other layers inside your frame by frame layers and then use them as the frames of your frame by frame layers. I'm gonna show you how to do it with an example. In this example, I wanna create a desert, and then we're gonna have two moles moving from the left side of the screen to the right side. And for our frame by frame layers, we're gonna use a combination of images and vector layers. To begin, I'm gonna create a background. Let me choose a color. Next, I hit the S key to choose the draw shape tool, and I draw a rectangle like this. I'm not very happy with the color. Let me hit Q to select the select shape tool, select it, and change its color to something else. Okay, now this one is better. Let me call this layer ground. Then I select it again and turn off its stroke. And then I hit the T key to select the transform points tool and drag from the top, so it only covers half of the screen. Then I hit Q again to select the select shape tool and click on somewhere to deselect it. After that, I create a new layer. Let's call this new one sky and press enter. I want to move it to the back of the ground layer, so we can draw the sky at the back of the ground. Then I hit the S key again to select the draw shape tool, and I choose a blue color, maybe a blue color that is close to white, like this, and then I draw it. Then I hit Q, select it, and turn off its stroke. On top of sky layer, I would like to draw some mountains. So let's call this new layer mountains and press enter. I want to make a new color. So I drag on this eyedropper and release it on this color. And then I choose it. Let's see. Maybe this color is good for our mountain. Let's just test it. I'm going to click on OK. Then I hit the S key to select the draw shape tool. And since I don't want to draw it with a stroke, I just turn this option off. Then I draw my rectangle. Yeah, this color should be good. Then I hit the T key to select the transform points tool. And I hold down the control and click on somewhere to deselect the points. And let's just move them so we can have our first mountain. I'm going to hit the A key to select the add point tool. Now as you can see, if I want to add a point, it won't be sharp. So I'm going to hit Ctrl Z and check this option so I can add some sharp points to this shape. Let's add some points to it like this. And it really doesn't matter how you draw these mountains. It's just important for them to have some variations. Now I'm going to hit the C key to select the curvature tool, and I want to make some of these points smooth a bit, like this. Then I hit the T key, select this shape by clicking on it, hit Ctrl C and V to make a copy of it. Then I hold down the Shift key and drag to the right to have a copy of this shape next to it. Then I hit Q, select this new copy. And let's change its color. Since I want these mountains to be at the back of the previous ones, they're really far from us, so their colors are closer to white, like this. I'm going to click on OK, and while this shape is selected, I'm going to hit down arrow key on my keyboard to send it to the back of our previous mountains. Next, I'm going to hit the T key to select the transform points tool, and I hold down the control and click on somewhere to deselect these points. And let's just add some variation to the position of these points because they are different mountains. Coming back to ground, I'm gonna hit the A key to select the add point tool. Let's add some variation to this ground as well, like this. I'm not gonna have too much changes in height, just some slight ups and downs. Then I hit the T key, hold down the control and select all these points. Hit the C key to select the curvature tool, and then I click on reset button to make them smooth. Now if I hold down the control and click on somewhere, you can see that now they have handles, meaning that they are smooth. Next I'm gonna hit the S key to select the draw shape tool, and I draw two rectangles, one on the right side, the other one on the left side. Let me hit Q, select this one. I'm gonna hold down the Shift key and then I select the other one. Let me pick this color and then I click on it. And maybe it's better to make it closer to orange. And then I click on OK. And then I click on this option to clip them inside this area. By the way, only in Moho 14 and later versions you can clip your shapes. If you use older versions like Moho 13.5, you can mask them instead. Then I hit the T key on my keyboard to select the transform points tool, and I hold down the control and click on somewhere to deselect all of these points. Let's move this one to here and this one to here. I'm gonna scroll down to zoom out and move this point to here, and then I press home key on my keyboard to reset my view. After that I hit the A key, turn off this option so I can add some smooth points, and then I add them like this. And then I hit the T key again to select the transform points tool and adjust the position of them again, like this. Let's just hit Q once again, and by holding down the Shift key, I select these two shapes. Actually, I want to change their color. I need a darker color. Well, that's better now. Let's see if we can just change these values. Okay, this one is better now. I'm gonna click on OK, then I hit the T key to select the transform points tool and adjust this part as well. I'm gonna use right click to pan. Alright, now that it's ready, I'm gonna press home key on my keyboard again to reset my view. Then I go to view and click on show output only. so I can see only the part of my project that will be in my render. And now we have our background. I want to create two holes, one on the left side and one on the right side. So let's start with the back of the holes. I'm gonna create a vector layer. Let's call it left hole. B stands for back, and then I hit enter. After that, I hit the J key on my keyboard to select the blob brush. And if I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left, I can decrease the size of my brush. Let me use this color. Then I click on it, increase its alpha value so it won't be transparent. And then I slightly make it darker like this. Let me click on OK and test it. Well, I want something darker. Let me hit Ctrl Z and make it darker. Let's see. I'm gonna hit Ctrl Z. Maybe it's better to make it a little bit brown, maybe. Okay, I think this color is good. Yeah, that'll be good. I'm gonna hit Ctrl Z. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to adjust the size of my brush. And let's draw the left hole. This should be the back of it. Then I'm gonna create a new layer. Let's call it left hole inside and press enter. This time I want it to be black like this. I drag to draw a black color. Alright, now let's draw the front part of it. I create a layer. Let's call this one left hole. F stands for front. And then I press enter. Let's use the color that we used before, this one. I draw something in front of it like this. Let's choose select shape tool and click on somewhere to deselect it so we can see the hole better. Alright, I like it. Since I want to select these three layers, I can first select the top layer, which is already selected now. Then I hold down the shift key and select the bottom one. So all three of them will be selected. And then I duplicate them. Drag on one of these two and move them upper so I can have my copied layers on top. And then I use this tool, transform layer, to move this new hole to the right side. Now that I have it, I can rename these layers. Let's start with this one. Right hole back, right hole inside, and right hole front. Now the scene is already completed. We can now bring our molds. Here I have some references. Let me bring these two. This one and this one. I just drag on them. Without releasing the click, I move my mouse on Moho icon and release it here inside the editing view. Well, here is our first mold and here is our second one. Let me hold down the control and select both of them and resize them. Okay, let me start with this one. I'm gonna make it smaller so it has some space for coming out of the hole. It's okay now. Let me put it here. Let's resize the other one. The other one has already some spaces. I'd rather to make it bigger. Let's see. Even bigger. Okay, I'm happy with it. Let's put it right here. By the way, to find the images like these two molds, you can search something like cartoon mold PNG. And now it's time to animate. First, we're gonna see some movements with frame by frame layer, and then we're gonna see the images of them, and then we see some other moves here, and we see their images here, and then we'll see a final move here. I want to create a frame by frame layer on top of this layer. So I select it and create it. Let me click on it and type something like mold 1 moves and hit enter. Then I double click on it, go to switch tab, uncheck this option, click on apply, click on this arrow icon, check this option again and click on OK. Now I press F5 to create my first frame and I hit the J key to select the blob brush, and let me pick this color and use a transparent version of it. Let me try it. I'm gonna hit Q to select the select shape tool and deselect it so I can see its color. Okay, I like it. Let me hit Ctrl Z and hit the J key again to select the blob brush, and let's draw our first frame. It'll probably be something like this here. And I want to create my frames every 4 frames, so I'm gonna set this number to 4 and press enter on my keyboard. Then I press F5 and draw my next frame like this. Again, I press F5 and draw my next frame. And again. Then for our next frame, I'm gonna use one of the molds. Since I created this frame by frame layer for mole 1, I'm gonna use the image of mole 1. So I just move it inside this layer. As you can see, moving a layer inside our frame by frame layer is totally safe. And of course, you guys know that this is an image layer because of the icon of it. As you can see, the icon of them are different from the icon of vector layers. But in case you guys want to see the kind of your layers, you can right click on here and check kind. And then I'm gonna drag from here to the left. And now you can see the kind of your layers next to them. In fact, this is an image layer, this is a vector layer, this is a frame by frame layer. So in this example, we imported an image layer into our frame by frame layer. Now we want to use it 4 frames after this keyframe. So we're gonna click on here 4 times. And then we right click on here and use the image of our mole as our frame. Well, you can move this image like this. But if you move it other than your image, the entire frame by frame layer will move, including the rest of the layers. See how they move? So it is not recommended to move the entire layer. Let me hit Ctrl Z. Instead, you can just go to your keyframe, then you go to the layer itself and move that layer individually, apart from other layers in your frame by frame layer. We should have this front layer on top, so I'm gonna move it on top of my frame by frame layer. It's better now. As you can see now, it feels like our character is coming through this hole. First, I want it to be somewhere around here. And don't worry about the lower part. Later, we're going to use mask to hide the lower part. So let me go back to frame by frame layer. Next, I'm going to press F6 to duplicate my layer. Here you can see we duplicated it. For this new frame, I want this mold to come upper than this. Again, I go back to frame by frame layer and press F6 and then move it upper. Alright, let's take a look at our animation. Perfect. Let's go to that keyframe again. Actually, from this keyframe to somewhere around here, I want my character to stay where it is. So I'm gonna click on here. And then from this frame, I want it to go down. So I right click on here and reuse this layer. And then I go 4 frames after this, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I right click on here and reuse this frame. And finally I press F5 so we can draw the rest of the moves again. I'm gonna click on this tool to select the blob brush and I draw this move. It starts from here. Then I press F5, it goes there. And I press F5 again, finally it reaches here. Then I'm gonna go 4 frames after this and let's duplicate this layer. And now you can see that it automatically creates a keyframe for you here using layer 6. I'm gonna go to layer 6, move it to here, maybe there. Then I go back to my frame by frame layer, press F6 and move this new layer a little bit upper. Again, I go to my frame by frame layer and press F6 and move this new layer upper like this. Now again, I want it to stay where it is until here, for example, and then I want it to go down. So I use the layer of previous frame. Then I go 4 frames after this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and reuse the previous frame. Then again, we'll see the moves. So I'm gonna press F5 and hit the J key on my keyboard to select the blob brush, and I draw the first move. F5, next move, F5, next move, F5, next move, and finally again I press F5 because in the end we should see nothing. Now let's take a look at our animation. I'm gonna play it using the space key on my keyboard. Alright, it looks good, but as you can see, we can see the lower part of this character, so we have to mask the upper part to hide the lower part. To mask our frame by frame layer, first we have to group it. But we cannot group a layer unless we are on the frame 0. So I'm gonna go back to frame 0, right click on this frame by frame layer and choose group with selection. To move my frame by frame layer inside a new group, let's call it mold and mask. And then I press enter, then I'm gonna slide down. Click on here to select this layer so I can create my new layer on top of it. And then I go here and create a new vector layer. Let's call it mask and press enter. And for now, let me hide the child layers so you can see better what I'm doing. And I'm gonna drag on this mask and move it upper and upper. Look at the icon of the group. I'm gonna move it upper until I see the icon with a different color. So I'm gonna release my click here. And now I know that this layer is a part of this group. If you're not sure, you can just close it and open it. And you can see that by closing and opening it, we can hide this mask layer and show it. And that means this mask layer is a part of this group. When you want to create a mask, you have to put the layer of your mask at the bottom of all of your layers. And now that we have everything, I'm gonna right click on this group and mask it like this. So this is how you can mask a frame by frame layer. Now let me select this layer. If we draw something inside this layer, you will only be able to see the parts of the layers on top of it that is inside this shape. See? For example here, we can only see the part of our frame by frame layer that is inside this shape. Well, here I want to use mask, but I don't want my mask to be visible. So I'm gonna right click on it, go to masking, and then I choose add to mask, but keep invisible. So as you can see, if I move these points, let me hit Control and click on somewhere to deselect them. If I move these points, you can only see the part of our frame by frame layer that is inside this shape. And that's when we say we masked this area. And actually you can draw more shapes to mask more areas. So let me hit Ctrl Z and go back to frame 0 because I don't want to create a new keyframe. And let me move these points to here just to test. Okay, now let me play it. As you can see, now we're hiding the lower part and it works fine. Let me do the same thing with the other pole. I'm gonna hold down the Control and drag to select this. Then I'm gonna hit Ctrl C and V to make a copy of it. And then I'm gonna move it horizontally using the Shift key to here. Let's take a look at it once again. Very nice. But wait, I think I saw a problem. Let's see. Here is a part of our moves. So it's not actually a problem because later I'm gonna draw some other shapes in my mask layer to show the moves as well. So that's okay. Let's go back to frame 0 and now I want to add some more shapes to cover the area of our moves. We have some moves at the left side of this hole and we have some moves in the middle and also we have some moves on the right side. Let me play this animation. Alright. That works fine. Let me hide the paths and play it once again. Very nice. I'm gonna show my paths again and go back to frame 0. Now let's say we want to duplicate this frame by frame layer and create the same animation with this mole instead. To begin, let me show its child layers. And as you know, some of our keyframes are using the image of our black mole, like this one, and this one. So we have to replace these keyframes that are connected to the layer of our black mole with new keyframes that are connected to our brown mole. But as you can see, all these keyframes that we have right now have the same color. So you might ask, is there a way to label a keyframe with a color so we can distinguish the keyframes that are using the image layers from the keyframes that are using vector layers? The answer is yes. Actually, you can select some of these keyframes, right click on them, go to label, and then choose one of these colors. For example, let's say in this case we choose green. Another way is that you can open your keyframe dialog from here and you can change your label from here. Or another way is that you can go to window and open your keyframe dialog from here. Or you can use Ctrl Alt F and then you change it from here. I'm gonna close it and click on somewhere to deselect these keyframes. You can see that now their colors are green. And why this is gonna help us, actually if you label a keyframe, you can hold down the Alt key and then hit W to go to the next labeled keyframe, or you can hit Alt Q to go to the previous labeled keyframe. This means that, for example, let's say we have some other labeled keyframes here, even with a different color, like for example, red. Now because all of these keyframes are labeled, if I hold down the Alt and press Q again and again, I can go to the previous labeled keyframe, or if I hold down the Alt key and press W, I can go to the next labeled keyframe. So it really doesn't matter if it's a red keyframe or it's a green keyframe, it has to be labeled with some color. And then using Alt Q and Alt W, you can move through them. But that also means that you cannot move through your red keyframes only, or move through your green keyframes only. So for instance, if I right click on this one and make it green, and deselect it, if I hit Alt Q, you can see that now we are on a green keyframe, and then if I hit Alt W and again, it also passes through these two red keyframes before reaching the next green keyframe. If you label the keyframe and you want to remove its label, you right click on it, go to Label and choose Plain. Or you can use keyframe dialog as well. Also, if there is nothing inside the layer like this one, if I right click on this and label it with a color like orange or any other color, I won't be able to see its color because there is nothing in it. But even though we can't see its label, if I hit Alt W, it recognizes it as a labeled keyframe. Because as you can see, the orange label is now checked. Let me remove its label. Also, you should know that Alt W shortcut and Alt Q shortcut are only available in Moho 14 and higher versions. So in Moho 13.5 or previous versions, you cannot use it. However, there are other shortcuts that you can use. For example, you can hit Alt Z to go to your previous keyframe and Alt X to go to your next keyframe, no matter if it's a labeled keyframe or it's a plain one. Also, using left arrow key, you can go to your previous frame, and using right arrow key, you can go to your next frame. Alright, now that you learned how to label your keyframes and how to navigate between them, it's time to label the keyframes that are connected to the layer of our black mold. Let me change these two labels to green. And let me take a look at other frames. Well, these should be green as well, because they're connected to the layer of our black mold. And this one? Well, these two should be green as well. Let me take a look. Alright, we labeled all of them. Now we can duplicate our frame by frame layer. Let me call this one Mole 2 Moves and press Enter. I'm gonna hide the previous one. There it is. Let's go up. Well, since we want to use a different image, I'm gonna delete all of these images. But to actually go through all of these layers and find those images, you know that it'll take a lot of time. The good news is Moho also has another feature that we can use to select the layers of a kind. For example, in this case, we want to only select the image layers of this frame by frame layer. To do that, we just right click on this frame by frame layer, and then you will see an option called Select Child Layers, and then from here you can select the kind that you want. For example, in this case, we want to select the image layers, so we click on this option. Now that all our image layers are selected, we can delete them, and then we select our frame by frame layer, double click on it, go to Switch tab, uncheck this option, click on Apply, click on the arrow icon, check this option again and click on OK. So we can see its child layers. Then as you can see, because we deleted the image layers, our keyframes are gray, but their labels are still green. So we can move through them using Alt Q or Alt W, see? And the mold that you see here is actually our previous frame by frame layer. Let me hide it so we can only see this frame by frame layer. And to begin, I'm gonna bring this layer into my frame by frame layer. It really doesn't matter where you put it, you just bring it inside. Then I'm gonna right click on here and choose it. Let me select it and move it to here, maybe lower than this. Here should be good. Then I go back to my frame by frame layer and I hit Alt W and duplicate my image. And now as you can see, its keyframe is automatically created. Now we can move it upper like this. Again, I go back to my frame by frame layer and I press Alt W and duplicate my layer and move it upper. Alright, now it's time to reuse it. So I'm gonna go to my frame by frame layer, hit Alt W and reuse my previous frame. Again, I hit Alt W and reuse it. Alt W again. Here I duplicate my image. Let's move it to here this time. And then I press Alt W and I duplicate it. Let's move it upper. And then again I hit Alt W and duplicate this frame and move it upper. Now it's time to reuse it. So I'm gonna hit Alt W, right click on here and choose Mole 5. Alt W, right click on here and choose Mole 4. There we go. We created it. If you want to add some latency to it, you can just right click on here and drag to the right. And let me show the other frame by frame layer that we had here and now play it for you. Perfect. To set an end frame for this animation, you can hold down the Alt key and right click on somewhere on this highlighted area on top of your timeline. For example, I want to set my end frame to 198. So I hold down the Alt key and I right click on here. Alright. We're done with animating our frame by frame layers, so let me hide their child layers. Also, we can animate holes. So for example, let me select the layers of the left hole using Control. As you can see, their name starts with L. So for example, if I double click on one of them, I can hold down the Control and select them together. And at the beginning of our animation, we don't want to have them. So we uncheck Visible and click on Apply. So they'll be invisible until this frame. Let's see. Yes. Let me do the same thing with the other hole. I'm gonna select one of them, hold down the Control, add the other ones to my selection. I go back to frame 0. I uncheck their visibilities and click on Apply. Then we move forward until this frame. I'm gonna check Visible and click on Apply. And then OK. Let's see. It works fine. So now I'm going to click on this tool to hide the paths and everything so I can play this animation for you and press space. Very beautiful. Now let me go back to frame 0. And I want to create a layer on top of all layers. So I'm going to select this layer and go to new layer and choose frame by frame. Let's call it Mole 1 Thoughts and press enter. Actually, I want to add some thought clouds so they can say something. So let's say this is where I want to add my cloud. Then I hit the J key on my keyboard to select my blob brush and I pick a color from here, for example, this one. Then I scroll up to zoom in. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to make my brush smaller. And I press F5 to create a new frame. And I check auto stroke so I can draw my cloud with a stroke. And I draw a small cloud here like this. Then I'm gonna hit Q, select it and set its stroke to something like 2. Okay. Next I'm gonna hit the J key, press F6 to duplicate this frame. And then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to make the size of my brush bigger. And then I draw a bigger cloud. Then again, I'm gonna reuse some of these frames. For example, here, I would like to use my previous frame. And then I press F5. And then again, here, I press F5 to create a new frame. And in this case, we can use the shape that we drew here. We just have to hit Ctrl Z, go to this frame and hit Ctrl V, and then we move it to here. I press F6. Again here, we can use this one. I'm gonna hit Ctrl C, click on here and hit Ctrl V to paste it and move it to somewhere around here. Next, we're gonna use our previous frame And finally I press F5. Let me take a look. That looks really good. Now for the other one, I think the first keyframe should be here. So I'm going to duplicate this layer and then I right click on here and drag to the right so I can have my first frame here. See? Let's rename this layer to something like Mo2 Thoughts. And now we can add some text to it. For example, in this case, I'm going to use my freehand tool. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to adjust the size of my brush. Then I scroll up to zoom in and write something like hi. And then here, I panned using right click. Let's write something like. And for the other one, I'm going to go to this frame. Then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush. And then I write something like subscribe. And then I go to this frame and then I right click to pan. Let me hold down the Alt key, drag to the right a bit to increase the size of my brush. And let me type something like buy. Then I hit the T key on my keyboard, hold down the Control, and I'm going to select the text and some points of the bigger cloud. After that, I'm going to hit Tab on my keyboard to completely select the text and the bigger cloud. After that, I'm going to hold down the Control and Alt together and click on the cloud to subtract the points of the cloud from my selection. So now I know that the points of my text are selected only. By dragging, I can move them. So let's adjust this position like this. And as you can see, we have some pixelation problem. If you look at the mountains here or over here, you can see that it seems like the quality of them is very low. However, if I turn off the paths, you can see that the quality of the shapes of our current layer is very high. Normally when you zoom in, this pixelation problem happens. So in this case, if we want to see our mountains with the highest quality, we have to select their layers. So I can use this slider to find their layers and then I click on it and now you can see that the quality of them is very high. Or for example, look at this ground. I'm going to click on here, you look here. See? As soon as I select the layer of the ground, you can see it with the highest quality. To see everything with the highest quality, you can go to display and uncheck GPU caching. And now as you can see, we can see mountains with the highest quality, the ground, the clouds, the texts, everything. But in these types of cases, if you zoom out, you're gonna see some pixelation in the strokes of your vector shapes, like this cloud. So when you zoom out to see everything with the highest quality, you can check this option. So checking or unchecking GPU caching depends on the fact that if you want to zoom or not. If you don't want to zoom and you want to have everything with the highest quality, then you check it. But if you want to zoom and at the same time you want to have everything with the highest quality, then you have to uncheck it. Let me click on somewhere to close this window and go back to frame 0. Then I'm gonna press home key on my keyboard to reset my view, and then I select eyedropper tool so the paths and everything will be hidden, so I can press the space key to play this animation for you. Nice! Let's take a look at it once again. Fantastic! Now let's talk about unsafe things to do when the child layers of your frame by frame layer are visible. Here in Moho 14, if I go to new layer and create a frame by frame layer and hit enter to confirm its name and then go to its settings and switch tab, uncheck this option, click on apply and then arrow icon and then check it again and click on OK. Here let's say we press F5 to create a new frame and then we move the layer of our new frame to outside of this layer. Like this. In this case, we move the layer outside of this frame by frame layer. But if I click on it, the keyframe of that layer is still there. So the problem here is that you cannot use this button to remove this keyframe. because first it looks for the layer of it and it cannot find the layer inside of this frame by frame layer, and therefore it cannot delete this keyframe. And as you can see in Moho 14.1, the only problem is that we cannot delete it. But in Moho 13.5, let's try to do the same thing. Here, if I press F5 to create a new frame and then move this layer outside of this frame by frame layer, if I click on my frame by frame layer and try to delete this keyframe, Moho will crash. See? So moving your layers outside of your frame by frame layer is unsafe and is not recommended at all. And we have a very similar problem. For example, in Moho 14, if I create a frame by frame layer and go to Switch tab, uncheck this one, click on apply, click on the arrow icon, click on this option and click on OK. If I press F5 to create a new layer and a new frame, if I delete this layer and then try to delete this keyframe using this delete button, the keyframe won't be deleted. Now let's try to do the same thing in Moho 13.5. Well, here, if I create a frame by frame layer and make its child layers visible and then press F5 on my keyboard to create a new layer and a new keyframe and then delete this layer, if I go back to my frame by frame layer and try to delete it using the delete button, my Moho will crash. So you have to be careful and you shouldn't delete the child layers of your frame by frame layers from layers window, because there might be a keyframe for them, and if you try to delete that keyframe, in Moho 14 that keyframe won't be deleted, and in Moho 13.5 it'll cause your Moho to crash. The next thing that is unsafe to do when the child layers of your frame by frame layers are visible is renaming them. Well, the first reason that it is unsafe to do is due to the fact that it can cause some anomalies. You can face these anomalies in Moho 13.5 or Moho 14. First, let me show them to you in Moho 13.5. Here I go to new layer and then click on frame by frame layer. Then I make its child layers visible. Then I press F5 to create a new frame. And again I press F5 to create another one. Here, if I try to rename this layer to something like layer 2, the first anomaly is that if I right click on my frame by frame layer, you can see that both of them are checked. But in a frame by frame layer, we cannot show two layers at the same time. So this is the first anomaly. Let me show you the other one. Let's say I draw something in this layer. To do that, I have to go back to frame 0 and then I draw something. And also I draw something else in this layer. Now if I select my frame by frame layer and take a look at my keyframes, you'll see that we can only see our path and not the shapes. Of course, if I hit Ctrl R, I can see a shape, but you'll lose the ability to see your shape when your frame by frame layer is selected, which can be absolutely annoying. Another thing that I want to talk about is that if I go to another frame to create a new keyframe, as you can see right now, this layer is brighter, meaning that this keyframe is connected to this layer. But if I want to create a keyframe based on this layer, again, the bottom layer will be brighter, meaning that this new keyframe is also connected to this layer. And the reason is that Moho always reads your layers from bottom to top. And since both of these layers have the same name, because the first one is read first, even though they have the same name, Moho always uses the bottom one to create your keyframes. Now let's test the same problem in Moho 14.1. Well, to begin, I'm gonna create a frame by frame layer. Then I double click on it, go to Switch tab, uncheck this option, click on apply, click on the arrow icon, check this option again, and then click on OK. And now I press F5, draw something inside this layer, for example, a rectangle here. And then I press F5 again and draw something here on this side. Next, I try to rename this layer to something like layer 2. And as you can see, I cannot see my layers anymore. And if I click on my frame by frame layer, you can see that we have nothing. Also, if I right click on it and use one of them, you can see that both of them will be checked. Also, no matter which one you select, this one or the other one, it always uses the bottom one to create your keyframes. Rather than these anomalies, if we try to delete this keyframe, our Moho will crash. Note that most of these crash problems that happens to frame by frame layers is because of your visible child layers. So most of the times if you just hide them, these types of problems won't happen. And the thing is, the same crash problem happens to groups as well. For example, here in Moho 13.5, if I create a frame by frame layer and hit enter to confirm its name, here let's say we make our child layers visible and then we press F5, the problem happens if you go back to frame 0, right click on this layer and put it inside a group, and then you click on your frame by frame layer and go to the frame that it's using. And now if I click on this button, delete frame, it'll crash. And the same problem can happen to Moho 14 as well. Here, if I create a frame by frame layer and let me make its child layers visible, I check this option and click on OK. Here, if I press F5, go back to frame 0, right click on this layer and put it inside a group, and click on my frame by frame layer and go to the first frame and try to delete this frame, well, at first it seems we cannot delete it. And if you try to draw something inside it, like this shape, and go back to your frame by frame layer and its keyframe, again it won't be deleted. But the thing is, I can right click on here and use layer 3, which in this case is my group. Now if I try to delete it, it will be deleted, but if I hit Ctrl Z and try to delete it again, my Moho will crash. So be careful with using the delete frame button on a keyframe that is connected to a group. Well, despite many problems that grouping your frames bring, we can use them to create masks inside our frame by frame layers. Let me show you how. Here I can create a frame by frame layer, then I double click on it, go to Switch tab, uncheck this option, click on apply, click on this icon, check it again and click on apply, and then OK. Then I go to this layer that is outside of my frame by frame layer, and let me call it rectangle, and let me draw a rectangle inside it. Also let me create another layer. Let me call this one pattern and press enter. Next I draw some rectangles that covers this shape from one side to the other one. Then I hit Q to select the select shape tool and I click on this shape to select it. Then I hold down the shift key and add the other shapes to my selection, and let me choose a color for them like this one. Alright, now I hold down the control and select both of these layers and I right click on them and choose group with selection, and let me rename it to rectangle and pattern. And then I press enter, and what I can do is that I can move this group inside my frame by frame layer and then use it as a frame. Like for example, let's say we want to use it here. We just right click on it and choose rectangle and pattern. And actually we can mask it now, see? And in case you want to keep these strokes around it, you can double click on the rectangle, go to masking tab and check this option, exclude strokes, and then click on apply or OK. Now you can see that we have these lines around it, and you can also duplicate this layer if you want. Now as you can see, we have it as a new frame called layer 3, and for example if I click on pattern and go back to frame 0 and hit Q to select the select shape tool and click on select all to select these shapes, I can choose a different color for it and go back to my frame by frame layer, and as you can see, now we have it with a different color. You can see the difference here between the two. So when it comes to using mask in a frame by frame layer, there is no issue with it, unless you want to delete its group using the delete frame button. The last unsafe thing that I'm gonna talk about is reusing your frames in a frame by frame layer, but this problem happens only in Moho 14 and 14.1. It does not happen in Moho 13.5. Let me show it to you. If you have a frame by frame layer and you make its child layers visible like this, let's say we press F5 to create a new layer and a new keyframe. Now if for some reason we want to reuse our first frame, and instead of a keyframe which is attached to layer 2, we want to have a keyframe which is attached to layer 1, and then we draw something inside it like this. As soon as you try to delete this keyframe with the delete button, after a few seconds, your Moho will crash. So please try not to reuse your first layer, especially when you have a keyframe connected to it on the frame 0. The next topic that I want to talk about is a common problem when you're working with frame by frame layers. To begin, let me create a frame by frame layer. Then I hit enter to confirm its name. Next, I want to create a bone layer. There it is. Again, I'm gonna press enter to confirm its name. And let's say we have a bone inside this layer, and then we wanna animate it. So I'm gonna go to a frame other than 0, like frame 24, and then using transform bone tool, I'll rotate this bone. Let me go back to frame 0 and select bone strength tool. As you can see, every bone has some strength, which can be shown as a halo around it. This halo is going to have effect on all layers inside your bone layer, including this frame by frame layer if we move it inside our bone layer, like this. Now this bone is going to have effect on any frame of this frame by frame layer. Here the problem is that, for example, if we go to a frame like 24 and use freehand tool, to draw something inside this shape, before I draw it, let me hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush so you can see it better. And then I start to draw a line. But as you can see, it draws it somewhere else. And then when you release the click, your line goes somewhere else, which is a weird bug. But the reason is that we are not on the frame 0. If we were on the frame 0, we could draw it like this without any problem. But when you're not on the frame 0, because the bone has rotated, it also tries to rotate your drawing, you know, while you're drawing the line. But that's gonna make it very hard to draw when you're working with a frame by frame layer inside a bone layer. And before I talk about the solution to this problem, let me show you something else. Let me select the freehand tool, hold down the Alt key and decrease the size of my brush. Now here is the problem. In this situation, because we have a rotated bone, if I try to draw something that goes outside of the screen and even outside of my editing view, like this, and release my click, we'll face a bug like this. It's a very crazy bug, and that's why I decided to talk about it in this video. Let me press home key on my keyboard to reset my view, then I hit Ctrl Z. Well, if you don't want to face this bug, first you have to go to your bone layer and then you go to frame 0. While the select bone tool is selected, you click on somewhere to deselect the bone, then you select add bone tool again and draw a bone. It doesn't matter where you draw it, just draw it however you want. Then you go to your frame by frame layer, and using this tool, which is called bind layer, you can connect this layer, your current layer, to any bone that you want. In this case, we want to connect our frame by frame layer to this bone. From now on, this bone will not have any effect on our frame by frame layer, which means that if we select freehand tool and go to other frames and try to draw something, Moho won't rotate it. So now we can draw our lines and see them where they really are. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is how to use a style in your frame by frame layer. To begin, I'm going to create a frame by frame layer. Before I hit enter, let me call it lines, and then I hit enter. Then I press F5 to create a new frame. Next, I'm going to select freehand tool and I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush. And as you can see right now, we have a few options in a style window. To see all of them, you have to click on advanced. For those of you who are really interested in creating styles, I already have a video about this window. You can go and watch it, but just as a reminder, let me explain to you what are these options. For example, this one is the color of your fill. This one is the first effect that you're gonna apply on your shapes. And then this effect will be the second effect, meaning that first Moho is gonna apply this effect, and your second effect is gonna be applied on top of it. Next, we have the color of a stroke. Here we have brush, so you can choose a brush for your strokes to draw them using that brush. Here, this value is the width of your stroke, and you can also apply an effect on your stroke and not your fill. In case you want to apply an effect on your fill, you have to use these two, and that's pretty much it. So we call these options a style. Every shape that you create in Moho has a style for itself. Right now, our current style is called defaults for new shapes, meaning that Moho uses this style to create new shapes. So because right now our default style is using this width, if I draw a line, my line will be drawn with this style, including this width. If you hit Q or select shape tool and select your shapes, you can see that now instead of defaults, a shape is selected. And as I said, every shape has its own style. Right now our shape, which its name is S1, stands for shape 1, is using this style, but we can change it. For example, we can change its color. I'm gonna drag on this eyedropper and release it on red. Now as you can see, we changed this color. As long as this shape is selected and you can see the name of it here, every time you change one of these, the style of your shape will change. But as soon as you click on somewhere to deselect it, again you can see that it says defaults for new shapes, meaning that, for example, if we change this style to something else, it's not gonna have any effect on your shape because it's not selected. So right now, any change that we make here will be applied to our default style. By the way, another way to select your shapes is that you can click on here and select them from here. If you select none, default style will be selected. Also, if you select your shapes, you can change their names from here. For example, if I type shape 1 and press enter, its name will be shape 1. But there are some cases that you prefer to create your own style. To do that, you have to click on here. From here, if you click on new, you can create a new style. If you guys use Moho 14 or higher versions, you can see that we already have some styles here. We're not gonna use them right now. We want to create our own style. So I'm gonna click on new. But if I click on it, the style that I'm creating will be automatically applied to this shape because this shape is now selected. As you can see the name of it here. So now if I click on new, you can see that here instead of shape or defaults, it says style, meaning that a style has been created for you and you can choose a name for it here. Let's type my pencil and press enter. Before I change any of these settings, let me select this shape. As you can see now, this new style that we created can be seen here. It's been applied to this shape because while we were creating our style, this shape was selected. And as you can see from here, you can apply two styles on your shape. First, Moho is gonna apply this style on your shape, and then on top of it, it's gonna apply the second style. And the thing is, the style that your shape is using is totally different from the style that you create and apply it from here. Right now, because we applied a style on this shape, changing the style of our shape does not make any changes. As you can see, when you apply a style on your shape, you cannot change these settings anymore. And the reason is that your shape is now using this style instead of using its own style. Now let's draw more shapes with the style that we created. I'm gonna select freehand tool, and instead of defaults, I'm gonna use my pencil style, and then I draw some other shapes. Then I hit Q to select the select shape tool and select one of them. And as you can see, all of them are using my pencil style. See? So what can we do with this feature? Let's say we want to change the color of them at the same time. Well, since all of them are using the same style, I can choose that style and change its color. And the color of all of them will be changed. Or for example, the width of them. If we type 10 here, we can change the width of all of them. This is very useful when you have a lot of layers, because when you have a lot of shapes with a lot of layers, you cannot select all those shapes at the same time. So in that case, just by changing your style, you can change the style of all of them. Or for example, when we're using frame by frame layers, we can draw our shapes with the same style so that when we want to change something for all of them, we just change that style. So as I said, right now these shapes are following this style, my pencil. But let's say we want them to only follow the width. So we can uncheck this option and this option, and now they're not following the color of fill nor stroke. They're just following the width. Or for example, let's say we want them to only follow the color and not the width. So we can uncheck this option. Now each one of them are following their own width, but they're following the color of this style because these two options are checked. Well, rather than these three checkboxes for style, we also have these three checkboxes for shapes. Let me check this one and for example, select this shape. Right now, as you can see, we cannot change any of these values because they're following the values of our style. But let's say for some reason, we want this shape to follow its own stroke color, but we want it to follow the width of this style and the fill color of this style. So we leave these two options unchecked and we check this option. Now this shape is following its own stroke color, but the rest of the settings are following my pencil style. So these three checkboxes is very useful when you want to add an exception, even for your shapes or your style itself. And in case you guys want to change an style or remove an style from a shape, you can change it from here. You just choose the style that you want, or if you want to remove it, you just choose none. And also when you select an style and you want to go back to defaults, you can click on here and choose none. Now as you can see, the default style is selected. Also when you select a style, to delete it, you can click on here and choose delete, or to delete these styles that we have not used yet, you can use delete unused, but I'm not gonna delete them. Let's keep all of them for now. Alright, now that you learned everything about style, using it, I'm gonna create an example for you. In my example, I wanna animate a hand that draws a line. So first, let's start with the line. To begin, I'm gonna hit the T key to select the transform points tool, then I hit Ctrl A to select all these points, and then I hit delete key on my keyboard to delete all of them. Then I right click on this black color to set my stroke color to black, and I type 25 for my width and press enter, and then I choose freehand tool. For my first frame, I'm gonna draw a line, but before I draw it, let me check something. If I go to default style, here as you can see we used an exception. Let me uncheck it because I want my new shapes to use all settings of my pencil style. It's okay now. Let's draw our line. Now that we have it, I want to press F6, then I hit the E key to select the eraser tool, and from the right side of this line, I'm gonna erase this part. Again, I press F6, erase the rest of it. And again, I want to repeat this a couple of times until here. Here, since in the next frame, I want an empty frame, I just pressed F5 to create an empty frame. Let me show you this animation. Well, I want this animation to be the other way around. Instead of erasing it, I want it to be drawn. But this was the most accurate and easiest way to do it. Now that I created all these keyframes, I just have to move these keyframes to the other side. So this should be my first frame, this should be my second one, third one, fourth one, and then the next one, the next one, and the last one. Let's take a look at it. See, I'm gonna select all of them, hold down the Alt key, drag on the last keyframe to the right to scale them. Let me play this animation. Okay, now since all these lines are using the same style, if we change that style, the style of all of them will be changed. So let's say we choose my pencil style, and from here we choose a brush for it and click on OK. And now as you can see, all of them are using the same brush. Let me minimize this window by clicking on Advanced. Then I want to import an image of a hand. Let's see, there it is. You just drag on it, go to Moho, move your mouse inside the editing view and release your click to import your image. By the way, if you guys want to find these types of images, you can just search hand with pencil. If you want a version for cartoon, just add the word cartoon at the end of it. And if you want it to be transparent with no background, you can just add PNG at the end of it. Now that we imported this hand, the first thing that we're gonna do is that we're gonna make sure this hand covers the entire screen. So I'm gonna scroll down to zoom out so I can see these control points, and then I go back to frame 0 because I don't want to create a keyframe, and then I scale it. But you have to be careful. If you make this hand too small, like for example this, if I go to view and click on show output only or use Ctrl J, this is what you're going to see in your render. So the hand will be cut off from here. So we're just gonna make sure this hand is big enough to cover the entire screen. And the rule is that the pencil should reach the top. So I'm gonna scale it a bit more. There we go. So this is right scale for this hand. Let me move it outside of the screen for now and select my frame by frame layer. The next thing that I'm gonna talk about is how to use onion skins. Well, there are some cases like this that rather than your current frame, you wish to see a vague image from your other frames. For example, let's say while I'm on this frame, I would like to see my next or previous frame as well. In that case, you can use onion skins. To begin, I'm gonna click on here to enable it. Even though this is very simple, this might be hard for some users to understand because most of them think about this gray option and then they try to click on it and then click on it, but it won't open. Actually, you have to turn it on from here. So you can enable it and then you can click on here to open this drop down menu. Before we open this drop down menu, let me talk about onion skin markers. As you can see, as soon as we enabled our onion skins, Moho showed a marker here. In fact, by setting markers on top of your timeline, you can tell Moho what frame you want to see. For example, let's say on this frame, we draw a shape like this. Then I'm gonna hit Alt-X to go to the next frame, and normally in Moho we shouldn't be able to see our previous frame. But since I have a marker here, I still can see my previous frame. Now let me draw another shape on this frame, maybe here. If I hit Alt-Z to go to the previous frame, I can see my next frame by setting a marker. If I click on here, I would be able to see my next frame. By default, your previous frames will be red and your next frames will be green. To remove a marker, you can click on it and it will be removed. Let me set it again. Also, there are some settings here that you can use. For example, right now you can see the outlines only, meaning that you can see only strokes. If you want to see strokes and fills, you should uncheck this option and check this one. And now we can see both fills and strokes. But the real difference is when you check this option, Moho is gonna draw these outlines with no transparency and a fixed width. But if you uncheck it, you're gonna see your strokes with some transparency and you're gonna see them with their real width. Also, rather than checking outlines only or colored fills, if you wish to see everything without using these two colors, you can uncheck both of them. Now we're looking at them with their real colors. Also, with these settings, if I go to another layer, I cannot see any onion skins. To have a vague image based on your markers from all your layers, you can go to onion skins and uncheck this option, selected layer only. If I uncheck it, rather than having an onion skin from my current layer, I can still see a vague image of the shapes that I have in other layers, including my frame by frame layer. And if you take a look at here, Moho draws your onion skin on top of everything. If you want Moho to draw your onion skins at the back of your shapes, you can check this option, draw behind. And now you can see that this green line is now at the back of this black line instead of being on it. See? Also, we have a new feature in Moho 14. In case you want to change the color of your previous frames or the color of the next frames, you can click on them and change them. Also, as you can see, right now we have two markers here, and if I move my playhead, they are moving with my playhead. But in case you want them to stay where they are, you can go to onion skins and uncheck relative frames. If you uncheck it, from now on, if we move our playhead, they will remain where they are. Also, let's say we created a lot of markers. In case you want to remove them all instead of clicking on them one by one, you can go to onion skins and choose clear all onion skins. This way all of them will be removed and now you can create new ones. When you're done with your onion skins, don't forget to disable it unless you're gonna have a lot of things on your screen. Now that we learned how to use onion skins, we're gonna use it to animate our hand. To begin, I'm gonna enable my onion skins, remove these two markers. Then I select my frame by frame layer and I find the first frame of this line. Let me select transform points tool and hit the delete key to delete this rectangle. And also we had another rectangle here. Let me hit the delete key to remove it. And then as you can see, first I have to put the pencil here. But the problem is that when I'm on this frame, the hand should be here at the end of the line and not at the beginning of it. And since I don't have a line on this frame, this is the frame that our hand should be at the beginning. But the problem is, since we can't see the line on this frame, we don't know where we should put the hand. And that is why I'm gonna create a new marker here so I can see the start point. Then I select the layer of the hand and move it to here. Okay, I guess we don't need to use onion skins anymore. Let me disable it. And while I'm animating this layer, I wish I could see the keyframes of my frame by frame layer as well. Is there a way to do this? The answer is yes. You can check timeline visibility for it. And now we can see their keyframes. So it's a lot easier now to animate it. All I have to do is to just press Alt X on my keyboard to go to the next keyframe, and then I move this hand to here. Alt X again, I move it to here, and again, and again. You just repeat this action, Alt X, move your layer, Alt X, move it, Alt X, move it, and again. And then you might say we animated our line frame by frame, but the layer of our hand is not frame by frame. So although on these frames, this hand is in the correct position, between these keyframes, it is not at the correct position. So to make this movement frame by frame, when it is not in fact in frame by frame, you can just select its keyframes, right click on one of them, and then you set its interpolation to step, like this. You can also do it from here, or go to keyframe dialog and do it from here. Or you can go to window, open your keyframe dialog from here, or use its shortcut. And then you set its interpolation from here. Either way, we'll see this movement frame by frame. Now the only thing that we should do is to make the part where the hand enters our view frame by frame. To do that, I'm going to go to animation and choose add keyframe. Add keyframe option creates some keyframes based on the current position of your layer, current scale of your layer, and current rotation of your layer. Of course, we don't want scale or rotation. We want this only for position. So I'm going to delete these two keyframes by selecting them and hitting the delete key on my keyboard. Let's create another one here and then delete them. And finally, we just have to select these three and set their interpolation to step. Let me uncheck this checkbox, click on somewhere to deselect these three keyframes, go back to frame 0, choose eyedropper tool to hide the paths and everything so you can see what we created better, and play this animation for you by pressing space. It's better to set an end frame for it. I'm gonna hold down the Alt key and right click on here and then play this animation for you again. It is very good, except that the width of our line does not match with the size of our pencil, but we can fix it easily. We just have to click on Advanced and go to our style. And from here, we can type something like 5. Not that small. Let me type 10. It's better now. Also, you can change its color from here, like this. So let me play it for you once again. Yes. By the way, this example was one of your ideas in the comment section, so I have to say I really appreciate your supports. Now let's talk about the transparency of onion skins. The first thing you should know is that when outlines is off and you want to set some markers, the more distance your marker has from your current frame, the more transparency it has. Let me add more onion skins. You can see that from left to right, the transparency of these onion skins is decreasing. Next, I'm gonna talk about the maximum number of onion skins that you can have. If you count, right now we have 8 onion skins. But if I try to click to add more onion skins, I can't. So the maximum number of onion skins that you can have is 8. Now that you guys learned how to use onion skins, I'm gonna teach you how to use it to create explosions. To begin, I create a frame by frame layer, then I type explosion and press enter. Next, I hit the J key to select a blob brush and press F5 to create a new frame. After that, I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush. Next, I click on red color and I start from somewhere around the center. Let me hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush more. And then I draw the red part of my explosion like this. Next, I want to use this orange color here, and I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush again, and then I draw the orange part of my explosion. And finally, I pick the yellow color, decrease the size of my brush, and draw the yellow part. This will be our first frame. For the next frame, I'm gonna press F5, but since I want to see my previous frame, I'm gonna enable my onion skins. Let me set my marker here. And in case you guys want to see your explosion with its real color, you just have to turn these two options off. Unless if you check colored fills, you're gonna see them with a dark color. And if you check outlines only, you could only see the strokes. So don't forget to uncheck these two options. For my next frame, I'm gonna pick this red color again, hold on the Alt key and increase the size of my brush. At the beginning of every explosion, there is a lot of energy. So we're gonna have massive increasing in scale. And that means the next frame should be something like this. Let me hit the T key and move it a little bit to the left, like this. Next, I'm gonna hit J again to select the blob brush, and I pick my orange color, and then I draw the orange part of it, like this. Next, I pick yellow color. Using Alt, I'm gonna decrease the size of my brush, and then I draw the yellow part. Then I press F5 again. Here our explosion starts to lose its energy, meaning that we're gonna make it bigger but less than before. And since we want to make it turn into some particles, we have to somehow determine how many particles we're gonna have. Actually, I want it to turn into 4 particles. One goes towards this direction, the other goes towards this direction. We have another one towards here, and another one towards here. So to begin, we're gonna have something like this. In case you guys want to erase a part, you can use this tool, eraser tool. You just erase it like this. I'm gonna hit the J key and fix this part. Now it's time to draw the orange part, and it somehow follows the path of our red shape, like this. And then we draw our yellow shape. I'm gonna hold on the Alt key and drag to the left to make the size of my brush smaller a bit, and then I draw it. As you can see, the yellow color is also following the general path. Now I'm gonna press F5 again. In this new frame, we're gonna see a separation. So I'm gonna pick the red color, hold on the Alt key and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush. And we're gonna have a layer like this here. We're gonna have another one here. We're gonna have another one here. And we're gonna have another one here. Then I'm gonna pick the orange color. Well, since this is the beginning of separation, the orange and yellow part should be closer to the center. So I'm gonna draw it like this. Let me hold on the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush. And then I draw it. As you can see, it's much closer to the center than the outside. We're gonna do the same thing with the other ones. Then I pick the yellow color. I'm gonna hold on the Alt key and drag to the right to make it smaller, and then I draw it. Next, I'm gonna press F5, pick my red color, and here we're gonna see the complete separation. So I'm gonna hold on the Alt key and make the size of my brush bigger. We wanna draw the same particles, but they're gonna move towards their directions more than before. And also we're gonna see the orange and yellow color at the center of the red shapes instead of being in the corner. So I'm gonna draw my first red shape. Let's draw the second one. And this should be the third one. And finally we have another one here. It's time to use the orange color. Let's draw it. And then the yellow color. I'm gonna hold on the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush. For the next frames, I'm gonna use F6 to just make a copy of them. Then I hit the T key and make them smaller one by one. So for example, for this one, I'm gonna hold on the Alt key and start dragging from one of the corners like this to scale it from the center. Let's do the same thing with the other ones. Using Alt key, I'm gonna scale them one by one. Again, I press F6. Make them smaller. Another F6. Let's make them smaller. Well, that should be the last time. And finally, I press F5 and let's turn off our onion skins and take a look at our animation. Well, it looks perfect. Let me turn off the paths and take a look at our frames one more time. Perfect. If I play it, it'll be very fast. So you can scale it by selecting all keyframes except the keyframe that you have under frame 0 and drag from the last keyframe to the right. Alright, then I go back to my first frame, hold down the Alt key and set my end frame to here. Let me play this animation for you. Or you can make it faster if you want. Like this. In this example, we turned our explosion to 4 particles and then we made them disappear. But this was just an example. When you want to create an explosion, you may want to create more frames or more particles, and that's totally up to you. Also, as you may have noticed, our particles had diagonal directions, but your explosion can have any direction that you want. So when you want to create your own explosion, don't forget to consider these factors as well. Okay, it's time to do another example. Here in this example, we have a sequence of an animation called Fantasimo, designed and directed by Mohammad Maddahian and animated by me. Let me play it for you. She's a smart girl that has just come up with an idea. And what we're gonna do here is that we're gonna add some motion lines here. So to begin, I'm gonna go to frame 0 and then I create a frame by frame layer. And let me type a name for it. Let's call this layer sign and press enter. Then I have to find my start frame. Actually, I'm gonna start from here. It's the first time that she holds her hand like this. And then I'm gonna press F key to select the freehand tool. After that, I'm gonna right click on this color to select it. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right a bit to increase the size of my brush. After that, I scroll up to zoom in and it's time to draw our first line. Well, I'm gonna draw 3 lines. One of them is gonna have a direction like this. The other one is going to go there and the other one is going to go there. I just drew these 3 lines so you can have a general idea of the directions. Let's hit Ctrl Z. Then I hold down the Alt key and drag to the left to decrease the size of my brush. And I start from my first line. Before I draw it, I have to press F5 to create a new frame. Then I draw the lines. And since at the beginning, they're gonna have a lot of energy, we should draw them with more length. So this will be our first line. And then this will be our second line and this will be our third line. Next, I'm gonna press F5 and to see my previous frames, I'm gonna turn on my onion skins and let me clear my markers. I want a marker here so I can see my previous frame. In this new frame, if you guys want to see the strokes with their real colors, you have to turn off this option here, outlines only, and also colored fields. And this way Moho will draw your onion skins with their real colors. So let me draw the next lines. In the next frame, I want this line to be here. As you can see, I drew it shorter than before. Let me draw this one. And also this one. Again, I press F5. This time, this line should be here. And this one should be there. And finally, I press F5. And then we're going to see just a point. So now let's take a look at them. Here, we're going to make them disappear. So I'm going to press F5 and let me see. Great. Now that we created them, we can turn our onion skin off. And let's see. If I press Home key on my keyboard and play this animation, we'll have this cool effect when she is holding her index finger up. To have a better color, you can double click on your frame by frame layer and change its opacity from here. For example, in this case, if I type 50 and press enter, now I can have the same frames but with lower opacity. See? And an important thing in this example is the slow in and slow out principle. As you can see, we use this principle at the end of this motion because as these 3 particles move, they're gonna lose their energies and get slower. And at the end, they're gonna stop and then disappear. By the way, if you guys want to play a part of your animation again and again, you can hold on Control and then click to set a temporary start point and right click to set a temporary end point. Now I can play this animation. And Moho will repeat this part for me. Now in this example, we want to learn how to use frame by frame layers to create lightning or neon effect. You may have seen this effect that we want to create in some break dances or hip hop dances or other kind of videos. And in this example, we're going to use Summer from the animated series Rick and Morty. Let me first play this animation for you. It's just a simple animation, and as you can see, we have some movements for the hands. So to begin, I'm going to go back to frame 0 and then create a frame by frame layer. Let me call it electricity, and then I press enter. Next, I'm going to find my first frame. Well, I would like to start from here, because here is the first frame that the hand is going to move like this. So I'm going to press F5 here to create my first frame here. Next, I press F key on my keyboard to select freehand tool, and after that I hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to adjust the size of my brush. I guess I want a brush like this. Yeah, that would be good. Then I scroll up to zoom in, and I want to draw some kind of electricity. Let me hold down the Alt key and drag to the left a bit. Okay, I'm happy with the size, so I draw my first frame here. Don't forget to move your hand a lot when you're creating electricity. Then I press F5 and draw the next frame. So we're gonna have something like this, I guess. Again, I press F5. The next frame would be something like this. And since we want to see our previous frames, I'm gonna turn on my onion skins. Again, I press F5. We're gonna have something like this here, and another thing here. Again, I press F5. It goes here. F5 again. Again F5. After that I press F5 again. We're gonna have it like this. F5. And again. Then we're gonna have it like this. Again I press F5. Gonna have it like this, and it's gonna cover the entire hand, and then it goes there, and then we have nothing. Let me do the same thing from the other side. I'm gonna right click to pan, and then I go to this frame. Actually, I need to have a marker after my current frame, as you can see. So this way I can see my next frame as well. Here I'm gonna press F5 to create a new frame. Here you can see my new frame, and I'm gonna draw something like this. And I go to the previous frame. Here I'm gonna press F5 to create a new frame, and I draw a smaller line here. And finally I go back and press F5 again and draw something like this. And again here, let's just add another point, and that's it. Let me turn off my onion skins and play this animation for you. I'm gonna press home key on my keyboard to reset my view and hit the space key. For the first move we have the electricity, and for the second one we don't. But since both movements are just the same as each other, we can just select these keyframes, hit Ctrl C, click on here, hit Ctrl V to make a copy of them. To match them, let me go to a frame that seems a bit off, and then I select these keyframes and move them. While I'm moving them, I'm looking at here. See? I guess this is our correct frame. Let's see. No. Here. Let's see. Not yet, I guess. Yeah, now we have it. Let's see. Okay. This would be our animation. But as you can see, we didn't use any style. In case you guys forget to use a style and you want to control the color of your frames, there is another way to do this. Actually, you can double click on your frame by frame layer, and one thing that you can do is that you can enable colorize. This way, you can change the color of your strokes. In this case, let me choose a blue color, a light one. I like this one. Let me click on OK. And again, and let me play this animation once again. Very nice. Now to apply a neon effect on it, you can right click on your frame by frame layer and use reference layer. This way, you can make a copy of it, but the difference between referencing and copying is that now if we apply any changes to our original layer with this red icon next to it, the changes will also be applied to the layer that we copied. As you can see, the icon of it now has an arrow icon, meaning that this layer is following another layer. How do we know which layer is following? If you select it, it's going to show you the original layer that is following with this red icon. So what are we going to do with this layer? I'm going to move it below our electricity layer here. Do not release it on here, as you can see, because it'll be a part of this group. You just move your mouse lower and lower, and now since the icon is white, it means that it won't be a part of that group. So we can release our click here, and let me go to a frame so you can see the changes. Here, for example. And then I'm going to double click on my layer. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some strokes around it using outline, but I'm going to increase its blurriness from here. And in case you're not happy with the amount of blurriness, you can just decrease it from here. And if you're not happy with the opacity, you can change its opacity from here, as you can see. Now, if I click on OK, we'll have an effect like this. See? It's much better now. Let me press Home key on the keyboard, go back to frame 0, and play this animation for you once again. And this is how you can create a neon effect in Moho. Okay, you guys ready for one more example? Let's go! Now in this example, I want to show you how to use guidelines when you're working with frame-by-frame layers. Here we have Wolverine from the animated series X-Men 97, and let me play this animation for you. He's gonna move one of his hands from down here to the top to defend himself against a knife. Well, right now we don't have a knife, but let's just focus on the movement of the hand. Later we'll add the knife, trust me. In action sequences, to emphasize on a movement, we usually use motion lines. To draw some motion lines for this hand, first we have to create a layer and draw some guidelines inside it to remember the position of this hand on different frames. So to begin, I go back to frame 0, and then create a new layer from here, a vector layer, and let's type guidelines position, and I press enter. Now I press F key on my keyboard to select freehand tool, then I right click on blue color to set my stroke color to blue, and because this is a vector layer, we can only draw things while we are on the frame 0. But how we are going to see the movement when we are on the frame 0? The answer is we can use onion skins. First we enable it, and then we have to find the start of the movement. Here, as you can see here, is the first frame that this hand is going to move upwards. See? So I'm going to click on this marker to remove it, and then I click on here, and as you can see, if I move the playhead, the marker will move with it. To fix it at its current position, I can go to onion skins and uncheck relative frames. From now on, if I move my playhead, this marker will remain at its position. It's time to go back to frame 0, and now if I have a marker, I should be able to see the other frames. But the problem is that because we are on this layer, the onion skins are not going to show us the other layers. If we want to see the other layers, we have to go to onion skins and uncheck selected layer only. This way, we can see the onion skins of other layers as well. So now we have it. All we have to do is to draw some lines so that we remember the position of this hand on different frames. I'm gonna press the F key to select the freehand tool again. And on this frame, the hand is here. So I just draw a line here to remember the position of it. How you draw your guidelines totally depends on you. So you may prefer to draw this line somewhere else, like here or here. It really doesn't matter. For the next frame, I just remove this marker and click on the next frame. So now the hand is here. I'm gonna draw a line. Again, I go to the next frame. The hand is here now. I go to the next frame. Here the hand is there. I go to the next frame. Now we have it here. Let's see. On the next frames, as you can see, the hand will remain at its current position, and that means we're done. So I'm gonna turn off the onion skins and create a new layer. Let's call this one guideline path. So since we know that these are the position of the hand, we can create a path based on them. One of the 12 principles of animation is arc, meaning that every natural movement usually follows an arc like this. In other words, they are not straight. So now since we know this rule, we know that if we want to create a path based on these positions, that path should not be some straight lines. It should be a curved line. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to hit the A key to select Add Point tool. As you can see, the lines that I drew shows the end of the blade, but I want to create my path from the middle of the blades so that I can draw my motion lines based on that path. Therefore, I go back to frame 0, hit the A key again, and click on here to show my paths, and start to draw from here. Alright. When you're drawing this path, if you want to draw it with smooth points, you have to make sure this option is unchecked, unless it'll be drawn with sharp points. So now it's time to adjust its curves. I'm going to hit the C key on my keyboard to select the curvature tool, and I just play with these handles like this. And when you're happy with it, you can click on here. Hit Ctrl A to select all of its points. Well, we want to create stroke only. I'm going to right click on this green color and then click on Create Shape. And then I hit Q to select the Select Shape tool and click on somewhere to deselect this shape. Now that we have this guideline, we can turn off guideline's position. Now that we have the path, we can create our motion lines. Since I want to draw my motion lines on top of everything, while this layer is selected, I go to New Layer and choose Frame by Frame layer. Then I type motion lines and press Enter, and let me go back to guideline path. Here, let's say we want to have 3 lines. So I'm going to hit the T key to select the Transform Points tool. Then I'm going to hit Ctrl A to select all of these points. And then I press Ctrl C and then V to make a copy of it. And then by dragging on this corner point, I make this new copy smaller. Let me change its position. Okay, I'm happy with it. To select the main line again, I'm gonna click on here to select it. Then again, I press Ctrl C and V to make a copy of it. And maybe here having the guidelines position is helpful. Let's see. Now I try to scale it. If you hold down the Alt key, you can scale it from the center. Then I hold down the Control and click on somewhere to deselect it. And now I can move these points to adjust the position of it. Now that it's ready, I can hide guidelines position, and then I hit Ctrl A to select all these points and Ctrl C to make a copy of it. After that, I go to motion lines, and since our movement starts from here, we should start to see our motion lines from the next frame. And if you want, you can turn this layer off, so you can see what you're doing in this layer. And here I press F5 to create a new frame, and then I press Ctrl V to paste my path here. And now using eraser tool, we can remove the part that we don't want, like this. Again, I press F5 and press Ctrl V, and then I hit the E key to select the eraser tool. And now I remove this part, like this. Again, I press F5 and press Ctrl V. And then I hit the E key and remove this part. Again, I press F5 and press Ctrl V. And let's erase some parts of it before reaching the end. So I'm gonna start to remove some of its parts from here, like this. And then here, it's gonna be like this. See? Let's just remove it more. That's good. Now I can press F6 and remove this part. And finally I press F5 to create an empty frame. Let's take a look at this animation. See? It looks good. But actually the color is not very good, because this is an action sequence. I would like to change it to a red color maybe. And click on OK. Also, to see it better, I'm gonna click on here to turn off the paths. And then I guess it's better to set its opacity to something like 50. Let me apply. Yeah, that's better now. I click on OK, and now we have it. It's time to add the knife. Well, let me go to View and click on Show Output Only to uncheck it so we can see outside the borders. And since I want to add a knife on top of the background, I have to select my background. And while I'm on the frame 0, I go to new frame and choose vector. To create a new shape, let me reset my style. And then I hit the S key on my keyboard to select the draw shape tool. Let me select rectangle and draw something inside this layer. Then I hit Q to select the select shape tool and I click on it to select it. And let me change its color to a brown color. I'm happy with this one. Let's click on OK. Then I deselect this shape, hit the T key, and let's scale it. I'm gonna hold down the Alt key to scale it from both sides. Yeah, that's good. Then I hit the A key to select Add Point tool, and then I drag from here like this and here. Let's do the same thing with the other side. And then I click on here, select rectangle, and draw a rectangle here. To send the blade to the back of the handle, I'm gonna hit Q to select the select shape tool, and then I select my rectangle and hit the down arrow key on my keyboard. Then I hit the T key and move it to here. And while select shape tool is selected, let me change its color to something like this. Let's see. Yes, I'm happy with it. Now we have a knife. I'm gonna hit the T key, then I click on here to show my paths. After that, I hit Ctrl A to select all points, and then I scale it like this. Let's see. I'm trying to see if the knife is small enough so that a person can hold it in his hand. Well, let me make it smaller. All right. I think this size is better. Let me call this layer knife and press enter. Next, using freehand tool, I'm gonna scroll up to zoom in, and since I'm gonna rotate this knife clockwise, I have to draw some lines here and draw some lines here so that this knife has its own motion lines. Then as you can see, if I select its layer and press home key on my keyboard to select my view, we have an origin here, which means that every time we try to rotate this layer, it's gonna rotate our knife in relation to this origin. Let me hit Ctrl Z. To set your origin, you can use this tool. Its shortcut is O, so we can hit O key on the keyboard and click in the middle of this knife. And now if I hit the M key to select transform layer tool, I can rotate this layer around the center of the knife. Let me hit Ctrl Z and put this knife outside of the screen. Well, I'm not sure about the position of it. Maybe it's gonna attack from here. After that, we have to rotate this knife. To begin, I'm gonna go to first frame, and then I go to animation and click on add frame, so we can have some keyframes for the position, scale, and rotation of this layer. Well, we don't need a keyframe for its points, so let me delete these two, and then we click on here, and I try to rotate this knife clockwise, and while I'm rotating it, I'm gonna hold down the shift key to rotate it by 45 degrees, so I can exactly rotate it by 360 degrees. Then I release my click and then release shift, and now as you can see, we rotated this knife. Now we want to use cycle to repeat this animation. So I'm gonna right click on here and choose cycle, and that's it. I'm gonna close this window. As you can see here, the knife is rotating, but there is a problem. Since the interpolation of this keyframe is smooth, every time that the knife is reaching this keyframe, it's gonna slow down. See? It doesn't rotate at a constant speed. So I'm gonna right click on here and choose linear so that when I play it, it rotates at a constant speed. The next question is, how can we rotate it faster or slower? Well, if you want to rotate it slower, you have to move this keyframe forward like this. See? And if you want to rotate it faster, you have to move this keyframe backward. Maybe we can put it here. Let's see. Now it's fast enough. Now that we animated its rotation, it's time to animate its position. Let's see. On this frame, we need this knife to be here. So I'm gonna move it to here, and let's check its speed. Well, it is a bit slow, so I'm gonna move this keyframe to here, for example. Let's check it now. It seems to be better, but we don't want it to slow down. So I'm gonna set this keyframes to linear as well. Let's see. Now it moves faster and better. From this keyframe, he's gonna defend himself and he throws the knife upwards. Maybe it goes there, who knows? And actually this keyframe should be linear as well. Let's check it. Okay, now that's great. Let's go to view and check show output only and play this animation once again. Great. Now I'm gonna select eyedropper tool and go back to frame 1 and play this animation for you. Alright, you guys ready for the last example? Let's go! Now in this last example, we want to make someone cry. I want to create this example from the scratch, and while I'm doing it, I'm going to teach you how to move something on a surface when you're working with frame by frame layers. So to begin, I'm going to drag on my image and go to Moho and release my click in my editing view. If you guys want to know how to find these types of images, first you have to create an Skype account, and then in Skype you'll find a chat called Copilot. It's actually an AI, and you can just tell it to draw something for you, like a sad girl, and then you can save it somewhere on your PC and bring it into your project. Now that we have this image, I want to scroll down to zoom out, and then I scale it a bit, like this. That's okay. Then I select this layer and let's draw our background here. So I'm gonna hit the S key to select draw shape tool, and I'm not sure if this is a white color or not. So I'm gonna use eyedropper tool to pick this color, and then I draw my rectangle like this. And as you can see, Moho usually tries to draw a stroke around your image, but actually if I hit Ctrl R, you can see that it is not a part of our render. So do not worry about this line here. So for example, now if I scroll up to zoom in, you can see that it is not actually there. So just don't worry about it. Let me call this layer BG, stands for background, and then I press enter and I press home key on my keyboard to reset my view. Now it's time to draw our guideline. To begin, I create a vector layer. Let me call it guideline, and then I press enter. After that, I hit the A key to select add point tool. Then I scroll up to zoom in. Actually, when I create my frame by frame layer, I want to draw a tear coming from here, and then it goes here and there, and finally it drops. But for these types of movements, we really need a guideline, so we can see the path of the tear while we're drawing it. To draw this path or this guideline, you have to understand that we have some ups and downs, because her cheek is now closer to us, but here is far from us. And again here, compared to the cheek, is far from us. So to draw a smooth path, first I'm gonna make sure this option is unchecked so I can draw smooth points, and then I start dragging from here. And as you can see, to move on a surface, the tear must change its direction when it reaches the cheek. And then again here, it has the same direction. And then here we have a change in direction. And finally, we prepare it to drop. I'm gonna right click to pan, and then I draw it like this. Let me hit the C key. I can hold down the Alt key and move the handle to have a straight line. And now I'm gonna hit the U key and hit Ctrl A to select all these points. We want to create a stroke. I'm gonna check it, and then I right click on here to pick the green color, and then I click on create shape. The reason that we cannot see our guideline is that it's at the back of our image. So I'm gonna move this guideline to the top of my image so I can see it. Let me hit the T key. After creating it, we can still adjust the points and the position of them. And then we can create our frame by frame layer. Let me type tier 1 and press enter. Then I right click on here to pick a black color, and I go to my first frame. Here I hit the F key to select the freehand tool. And as you can see, if I draw something and scroll up to zoom in, you can see that at the beginning and the end of our shape, we have some semicirculars. But since we want to draw some drops, let me hit Ctrl Z. We can actually go here, freehand options, and then check taper start. This way, if I draw something, the start of it will have less width, which is exactly what we want right now. I'm gonna hit Ctrl Z, and since I want to draw my first frame, I'm gonna press F5 on my keyboard to create a new frame, and then I scroll down to zoom out, and that's it. Now we can draw the tears. Let me hold down the Alt key and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush, and then I start drawing from here. This should be the first frame that we want to draw, so I'm gonna draw something like this. But I want my tear to follow the slow in and slow out principle, so in the beginning, it's gonna move slowly. So I'm gonna press F5 to create a new frame, and to see my previous frame, I'm gonna turn on my onion skin. As you can see, I have a marker here. And now, I start from the middle of the previous frame, and draw the next tear, because I want it to move slowly. Again, I press F5 and draw the next tear, like this. Again, I press F5 and draw the next one. And as you can see, every time that I draw, I'm trying to leave more distance between my drawing and previous frame. Here it should move faster. As you can see, I'm drawing it longer and with more distance. Again, we're gonna slow down here. I press F5. So we have less distance and shorter lines. I'm gonna right click to pan. And again, I press F5. Again, I press F5. And finally it drops. So I'm gonna press F5. We're gonna have it here, for example. F5. We're gonna have it here. And this is our border. So then in the next frame, it's gonna go outside of the screen. So all I have to do is to just press F5 because we don't see it in the next frame. Then I turn this option off. And let me check the movement once again without the guideline. Well, it moves really fast, but it's fine because we can select these keyframes, except the first one, and we hold down the Alt key and start dragging from the last frame. Let's see. Very nice. Now that it's ready, let me change its name to something like right tier 1 and press enter because we want to add the same tier to the other side. To do that, I'm going to duplicate this frame by frame layer and call it left tier 1 and press enter. Next, I hit the M key on my keyboard to select transform layer tool. And because I can't see the tiers, I can use onion skins and set a marker here so I can see the first frame. And since I want to see this tier with its own width, I go to onion skins and uncheck this option, and now we have it. So now I can click on here to flip this layer, and then by holding down the shift key to move it horizontally, I'm just gonna drag on this layer and move it to the left to adjust its position. Let me turn off the onion skins and play it. Very great, but we're gonna add some delay to them. Using right click, I'm gonna drag on here to the right to add some delay to the left tier. Let me play it. Great, now I can hold down the control and select both of these layers and duplicate them. And let's see, for the right one, I want it to be here using right click. Let's see. Yes, and for the left here, I want it to be here, for example. Let's see. Okay, now here should be the end of our animation. So I'm gonna hold down the Alt key and right click on here and play this animation once more. Great, let me go back to frame 0. And then I hit home key on my keyboard to reset my view. After that, I want to add some filters on the screen. Let me create a new layer and call it black filter and press enter. And then I hit S key on my keyboard. And as you can see right now, if I draw something, it'll draw it with fill and stroke. Let me hit Ctrl Z. I want to uncheck these two options so I can only draw paths. See? Let me hit Ctrl Z. Then I'm gonna scroll down to zoom out, right click to pan, so I can have everything at the center. And then I try to draw a rectangle here. Don't worry about the position of the points and everything. We can just adjust them later. But for now, I'm trying my best to draw something at the center. And then I zoom out more by scrolling down and draw a very big rectangle here. Now I'm gonna hit Ctrl A to select the points of this rectangle and the points of the bigger one. And then I hit U key on my keyboard to select Create Shape Tool. Then I check Fill from here because we don't want it to have any stroke. And I'm gonna click on here to choose a black color, and then I click on Create Shape. Let me hit Q on my keyboard to select the Select Shape tool and click on somewhere to deselect this shape. Now I'm gonna press Home key on my keyboard to reset my view, and then I double click on my filter and increase blur. After that, I'm gonna click on OK, hit the T key, hold down the Control and select these points. And now by holding down the Alt key, I can scale this filter symmetrically to somehow fit it inside the screen. Let's do the same thing from the sides. Very great. By adding this filter, we can emphasize more on the emotions of this girl. And let's add another filter. Let me call this one Color Filter and press Enter. Then I hit the S key on my keyboard to select the Draw Shape tool. And then I check Autofill and Auto Stroke because I want to draw shapes with fills and strokes. Actually, having a stroke really doesn't matter, but here fill was more important for me. And then I choose a color from here. Let's see, maybe this color. By the way, we can change the color of it later. And next we just draw our filter on the entire screen. And then I right click on here, go to blend mode and choose overlay. As you can see the result, overlay blend mode is very useful when it comes to colorizing your black and white images. And in case you want to change the color of this filter, you can hit Q to select the Select Shape tool, and then you select your filter, go here, and change your color like this. It really depends on yourself. You can change it to whatever you want. See? But for sadness, we usually use the blue color, so I'm gonna click on Cancel. Let me play this animation. Okay, I'm gonna click on somewhere to deselect this filter. Now let's work more on the tears. I'm gonna select the top one, hold down the Shift key and select the bottom one, and I go back to frame 0 so I can create a group, and I right click on one of them and choose Group with Selection. Let me call this one Tears. Then I press Enter on my keyboard, and let's see. We're gonna find a tear that looks terrible. For example, these ones. Then I'm gonna double click on this layer. Let's just increase the blur radius. Now that looks better. Also, we can decrease the opacity like this and click on OK. I'm gonna press Home key on my keyboard and play this animation once again. It's very nice, but another problem is that when you look at these tears, here, because the face is bright, we can see them, but because at the bottom we have some dark spaces, when the tears reach there, we're not really able to see them. But because they're liquid and they have reflection, we have to be able to see them even in the darkness. So I'm gonna go back to frame 0 and then right click on my group, go to Group Mask and choose Mask Inside Bottom Layer to mask this group. And let me select the bottom tier, hold on the Shift key and select the top one to select all of them. And then I right click on one of them and choose Group with Selection. Let's call this one Black Tears. And then I press Enter. After that, I'm gonna right click on it, go to Masking and choose Don't Mask this layer. We're just going to keep our black tears. Next, I'm gonna duplicate this group. Let's call it White Tears. I'm gonna press Enter and then I double click on it and make it white. After that, I click on OK and then OK. Now at the bottom we have black tears and on top of it, we have white tears. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna mask these white tears to be inside this dark area. So I'm gonna select this layer and create a vector layer on top of it. Let's call it Mask for White Tears and press Enter. Since this is a mask area, I'm gonna right click on it and set it to Add to Mask. But the problem is if I set it to Add to Mask and draw something inside it, we're gonna actually see it. But since we don't want to see the shapes that we draw inside this layer, I'm gonna hit Ctrl Z and set it to add to mask, but keep invisible. So now if I draw something, it'll act like the area of our mask, but the shape itself will be invisible, which is exactly what we want. Let me hit Ctrl Z again. The next thing that I want to do is that I want to mask this group to be inside this area. So I'm gonna right click on it and mask it by going to masking and choose mask this layer. Now as you can see, if I for example draw a shape inside the layer of my mask, any tears in this layer will be bright instead of dark. I'm gonna go back to frame 0 and hit Ctrl Z, then I hit the S key again to select draw shape tool and I draw my rectangle here. Then I hit the A key to select add point tool and I drag from here to here. And then if I try to drag from here, the handles of this point will also move. Let me hit Ctrl Z, click on here so I can see the handles, and don't forget to turn this option on so the handles will be fixed. And now if I do something like this handle remain at its current position, which is exactly what we want. Now let me hit the C key, adjust these handles, hit the T key and move it here. And let me scroll up to zoom in so I can see everything better. Actually, it's better to do something like this. Again, I hit the A key on my keyboard and add a point here. And then I hit the C key and adjust its handles. And now we have it. Let's check it. As you can see, the tears will turn into white as soon as they reach this area. Now I'm gonna press home key on my keyboard to reset my view, hit the L key on my keyboard to select the eyedropper tool and turn off the paths and everything, and I go back to frame 0 and play this animation. Very nice. To add more motion to this animation, I would like to hide the child layers of this group. Go back to frame 0. Select the layer of the girl, hold on the shift key and select the top layer. Right click on one of them and choose group with selection. Let me call this one girl and press enter. And now we can click somewhere in the middle. And then I press M key on my keyboard to select the transform layer tool. And by holding down the shift key to move this layer vertically, I slightly move this layer lower than this, like this. And then I go to the end frame. I drag to select my first keyframe. Hit Ctrl C and then Ctrl V to make a copy of it and paste it here. Now let me hit the L key on my keyboard to select the eyedropper tool and play this animation for you. It is very great. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Before I say goodbye, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. We've surpassed 2,000 subscribers and I really appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell, and see you in the next video.